Committee meeting, so I'll ask everybody to please rise for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge
Allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
All right. So that would bring us to public input. Before we move on. Excellent. Come on down. I want to ask you to state your name and address for the record.
Dan Harrison, 95 Pinecrest. So I've been watching the last couple school budget meetings from home. So I'm one of the six. So I've understood the methodology you've employed, right, with the averaging of 3 prior years and using that as a basis to project next year. And I got to thinking about that methodology. So I don't want to talk about specific line items. I want to talk about the methodology, right? Mm-hmm. So that methodology, on observation, and I actually think it's a pretty good methodology for an insight into the budget. Mm-hmm. Where I'm concerned is I don't think it's a definitive answer, right? It's one perspective. It's one view of the data. So, and I'll get to these, but I took the liberty of extending the data and extending the analysis a little further to get a different perspective. So the first thing to observe, right, there's an inherent assumption in that methodology that all school years are the same, right? And therefore you can apply an average from previous years to a future year because they're all the same. And we know that's not true, but it's a reasonable assumption to get some perspective and some view of the data, right? So that's a premise that I want to talk about in the data, right? And then what I did is I took the data that your method of the prior years, right, using a mean, an average, and I extended it to look at the probabilities. So I took the standard deviations of that data, and it's a very small data set. Got it? It's a very small data set to take an average of. It's a very small data set to take a standard deviation of. I got it. But it's the data you've been using, so I took that data. So I want to share some of the data, right? The analysis that I extended. So I'll come up to my one.
Absolutely. Thank you.
Thank you.
If you could just
sure, and in color.
Oh yeah, that's for you. So
dance.
So well, those are
Michelle,
working their way down.
If you have an extra one, but I'll work on it.
Okay. Yeah, I could email it too if you.
That'd be great.
Just so we can get it into the minutes.
Yep. Oh, absolutely. Didn't occur to me, but that makes sense.
Thank you.
Oh, I don't have it.
Yeah, she hasn't seen this.
This is.
It helps to see it when I do this.
Okay. So so the first chart is rather busy, but let me walk you through what this is because this kind of sets up the analysis to come. So there's 4 curves on the chart. Folks at home can't see that, but the chart on the very far left, the reddish purplish line is unchanged data. That's the raw prior years actuals. You'll note in the little subtitle there, I added the 2020 budget year in for 2 reasons. One, to get more data in the set because 3 is a very small number of data set, right? So now it's 4 data points. But also because the other concern I had with your methodology is that the most recent data in your average is 2 years removed from the budget you're trying to predict. Correct. So this puts that middle data point in. So now the most recent data is 1 year removed. However, recognize that's a budget, not an actuals. So the second chart removes that because that's a point in the analysis that's not clean. But nonetheless, the red curve is the probability of the raw data with no changes. Nothing's changed from 5 years ago till next year. Then I added some of the factors that we know are changing because that assumption that every year is the same is not true. We know there are factual things that are going to change, that have changed. So the orangish line, the next line over, just adds a teacher contract, right? It's already a fact. It's already been approved. It's 256K impact. So it shifts the whole probability curve, 256K. So then I added one more factor, which is a little more nebulous, but I added inflation because that's a reality we all live with. Those are knowable numbers. So I took, did I cite it on here? I guess I should have. So I took the Bureau of Economic Analysis GDP price index measure of inflation. There's lots of measures out there. You could pick another one. That's 1.8%. So I applied 1.8% for 2 years on top of the 2019 numbers. So 2018-19 school year plus inflation to 2019-20 plus another 1.8 to 2021. So that's the blue curve is just inflation. And then the green curve, which is the one I want to talk to, is teacher contract plus inflation. So that's the probability from the small data set that we have of what the school costs are going to be next year. It's a small data set, but this is the data we have. This is the analysis you've all been using, just extended to a probability, and you'll see in 2 slides to a risk. So I highlighted in the 2 vertical bars the school budget recommended budget, which is, as you can see, somewhat further to the right. And then where I think you were in your recommended budget at the end of last meeting, which is 22.3, give or take. Visually move that bar if I got the numbers wrong, but that's where I think you were. So we know there are other factual changes that I didn't account for because I don't have numbers to shift it a known amount. So we know that the enrollment's up 2% this year. I did some digging on that data, and I think every reasonable person would expect it's going to go up another 2% next year based on the number of houses being built in Litchfield. I'll show you the population. I don't know if everyone is aware, we had a 2% spike in population in 2018, which is massive because for almost 10 years, it's been about 0.5% a year. And then we went up to 2% in 1 year. We're building 50 new houses in Litchfield, starting in, I think the first ones were sold in 2019 off of Page Road and Hillcrest. There's almost a 2% increase in the number of houses in Litchfield coming. We've seen the start of that. We haven't seen the end of it. So enrollment's going to increase. It's already started. It's going to continue. So that's another change. I can't put a number on how much that's going to cost, but we know it's a change. It's going to shift these numbers up. The transportation contract, I didn't get a number on it. It's another change. It's factual. It's fairly small, but it's here. Sports services, I understand, is a mistake on my slide. That shouldn't apply. So my assessment of that is that the school board position is a reasonable position on this curve. They're not way out at the 3 sigma numbers. They're not way out on the far extremes. It's a reasonable place to be with what we know. Let me go on and show you a better way to visualize it, I think. So I'm going to skip the second slide unless there's questions, but this is the data you've been using, just 3 years of actuals, no budget, same data. I think it's not quite enough data to make this conclusion, but if you wanted to see it that way, that's there. So slide 3 is where I wanted to talk to you. So all I did is I took those probability curves and I converted them to a risk. So that's the risk at those dollar amounts that the schools will be underfunded. So that's everything to the right of the budget on those curves. So how you read this is if you take let's start at the blue recommended budget at 22.7. Up to the green line, that's at about 20% risk. So that says for the 2 factors that I've accounted for, that's an 80-20 position. So that's a pretty conservative position to be in if it's 80-20, but it only accounted for 2 factors, right? We know for a fact it's higher. The risk is higher, right? The costs are higher than that, right? So contrast that to I think where the budget committee ended up was the red line, right? Which is at about a 35% risk. So that's about a 65-35 position. But we know for a fact it's higher than that. So what I conclude from this is I think the position you've reached by going through every line in the budget and using the methodology, I think you've pushed yourself close to a 50-50 position. And that makes absolute sense with your methodology because if you went the mean of everything, you would be at a 50-50 position. And I would submit that a 50-50 position is way too risky for a school district, right? We know things can happen and they must be paid for this year. We can't go into a year at a 50-50. Now, we don't need to go in at a 90-10 either, right? We've got to balance the taxpayers and the school district. So what I think we know, based on the small data set, is that the school district proposed budget is no more conservative than an 80-20 position. And I think it's probably closer to a 70-30 with the unknowns that I haven't added in here. We know that they exist. They're not here. I think it's probably about a 70-30 position. I think that's a reasonable risk position. I think a 50-50 risk position is not. So the next couple slides just go down some other paths about those other unknowns and why I think the risk is actually higher. The next slide just looks at the growth, and I've color-coded this so that nobody makes any mistake that I'm mixing apples and oranges here. The columns on the left are actuals, the blue columns. That's the growth in the school budget from 2017 to 18 at 2.5%, and then from 18 to 19 at 4.7%. The 2 columns on the right are budgets, right? So that's the growth from 2019 actuals to 2020 budget was 3.3%. And then from 2020 budget to 2021 school board proposed was 3.3%. So here again, 3.3% growth is not outrageous. It's not out of line with the past. It's not a massive number. We're not asking 10% growth that nobody can afford. 3.3%. The school board position is 1.26, or I'm sorry, the budget committee position at the end of last meeting was 1.26%. Enrollment went up 2% this year. That seems like a really risky position to be in.
My numbers come to 1.52%. So without,
Okay, so thank you. I
yeah,
perfectly recognize my numbers are not the most recent and perfect numbers. So by all means,
Yep.
take this and correct it, right? What I want you to hear there is the methodology and the perspective, right?
Yep.
And if the numbers are off by a little, please correct it.
that's good. You know, there are 3 3-year positions coming up this term. Just saying.
I'll take that under advisement.
Nice try, Andrew.
So the next slide talks about the amount returned to the taxpayers, and the only thing I wanted to highlight there is that last year the school board returned very little, 0.7%, which means the contingencies that they planned for, some of them happened last year, where in previous years we've been lucky that these hadn't happened, but it can and it did last year. And then the last
after
topic,
encumbrances, right?
Yes.
okay.
So that just means that there was money left over that was used for things that were often already budgeted in future years but brought forward. So
Actually, last year, that's not the case. Last year, we had a list of items that we took out of the budget to keep the budget lean. And we decided that if we had additional funding at unassigned fund balance at the end of the year, that we would use it towards those other things.
Which you're entitled to do.
which is fine.
Yeah. I just wanted to clarify that if we didn't pre-buy things, it was items that were identified early on and
But it was,
disclosed.
my point though is still money that had we not spent it on those would still have been available. So it's just a way to buy down that number. That's all. So go ahead.
Okay. So the last slide, and then I'll conclude and we can move on.
I appreciate it.
This is the New Hampshire Office of Strategic Initiatives population estimates for Litchfield back to the 2010 census. So this is the growth rate of Litchfield from 2010 on. And you can see we've been less than 0.5% a year since 2010 until 2018, and then we grew at 2.1%. I did a quick Zillow search last week. There were 11 new construction houses for sale in Litchfield. And I took a drive through the Page Road development, and there's something like 25 more houses coming, plus the 15 that were approved off Hillcrest.
Mm-hmm.
So that's something like a 1.6% increase in the number of houses in Litchfield between 2019 and whenever they finish, maybe 2020, 2021. So the school's growing, and it's going to continue. And it's not something the school board can control. It's just something they have to pay for. So I'll leave you on the last slide here, slide 7. Looking at the numbers this way, right, taking your analysis and kind of extending it to a risk assessment. My view is that I think the school board position is about a 70-30 position. I think that's a reasonable risk position to be in that balances the school district needs with the taxpayers' interests. I think the 50-50 risk position where this board arrived at, and I know you haven't discussed your bottom number, you've gone through the intermediate lines, but I think your bottom number is somewhere in the ballpark of a 50-50 position, and I think that is way too risky for a school district. And then finally, the district is growing. This is not the year to be cutting. This is not the year to be flat budgets. The costs are going up, right? And just the teacher contract, inflation, but the schools are getting bigger, and it's because we're building more houses. So we should expect that costs are going to go up. We're already starting to see it this year. It's going to continue. So that's what I wanted to share with you today.
Well, thank you very much. Appreciate the time and the effort that you put into that. Thank you.
Yeah, in my opinion, very fair points. Appreciate the analysis. You're absolutely right. There's continued growth in the town that needs to be accounted for. My big thing is it's what if, right? I mean, we're making assumptions based upon, well, we think there's going to be more kids. We think, right? I don't know that as a budget committee that's our position to take. I mean, it's really for the committee to debate and to talk about. I mean, whatever this committee's position is, I'm certainly willing to have that conversation.
So I think it's interesting perspective. To
Absolutely.
hear, like I didn't think about 3-year average and the impact of the teacher contract. Like it's certainly perspective for us to consider.
Okay. Is there any other public input that people would like to bring forward? Okay. Hearing none, that goes into the, you wanted to bring up something prior to the minutes.
Well, I just wanted to recognize today being January 9th as National Law Enforcement Day. So I wanted to make a special thank you to our police department and all the law enforcement officers that live in this town, whether it be supporting other towns or even our large state police presence in town. Thank you very much for your service.
Yes, thank you. All right. So then that would move us into the review and the acceptance of the minutes. The ones for January 2nd went out today, so we can discuss those next week, since we will be meeting after the budget hearing. And then,
I'll make a motion to approve the 12-19 minutes
As amended.
as amended.
at the last time, right?
When was that?
There was multiple amendments, and I think they're all captured. But
The most current version.
Sure, as amended.
second.
All those in favor of approving the latest version of the December 19th minutes, please indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed and abstain.
Aye.
Right. As I said, we'll table the January 2nd ones to give people time to go through those ones as well. Let's see. That moves us into correspondence. We had the minutes, which we had several rounds of those, so thank you for getting through those. I sent an email to the school board as a follow-up to last week's meeting about some questions that were outstanding. As a result of that, we did get the updated salary ladder associated with the support services contract. Hopefully the other one will be answered under responses to questions or at some point in relative to the budget. Andrew forwarded a question from a concerned resident to the Board of Selectmen or the town administrator relative to fund balance. And we received a response back. We've since submitted another question as a follow-up clarification. The main question being relative to why we weren't using more of the fund balance to fund the communications upgrades and how the fund balance is calculated and those kind of things. And a concern about the Board of Selectmen's position to fund it in arrears, which increase the amount of interest in order to stay within tax cap. And was that a wise, why was that decision made? So those are going back and forth. We will we'll get them sorted. We can discuss it more at the deliberative so that more people can have the answers while we nail down a very coherent and efficient response to that. Okay. Any other correspondence that I missed? All right, hearing none, that moves us right into the school district budget. Come on down.
Actually, I'm gonna, if you don't mind,
Oh,
as
absolutely.
the school board rep, subbing for Rob, he sends his love. Tonight, I have some motions that I'd like to put forward regarding the cuts and reductions that
All right, we'll
have
get,
been made. So far.
can we go through the default budget, the responses to questions and some, because we haven't finalized the budget voting yet, so motions can be made then, if you're okay with it.
I'm not sure what that means. You haven't finalized the budget.
So we went through our first pass.
Yep.
There are some more discussions to be had.
Yep.
So we're going to be going over the budget before we lock it down.
Right.
So
No, that's what I want to do. I'd like to make a motion to restore $9,224 to line 519 transportation for vocational programming.
Right. I'm saying when we get to that part of the agenda, we can do those then. All right. All right. Unless, we're
doing default budget or what's?
Well, I was hoping we'd have an update on the default budget and warrant articles and all those kinds of things for tonight.
So I can do that? Yep. You didn't hand these out?
I did not hand them out yet. I was leaving that for you.
I'm sitting there and the suspense is killing me. There we go.
I peeked. I couldn't help. Couldn't help myself.
That's for you.
Oh.
So I'll walk you through it very quickly.
Excellent.
Page 1 is basically just announcing that our deliberative session will take place on February 8th. It's on Saturday at the Campbell High School. And the second session of the annual meeting, the actual voting is, of course, during regular voting on Tuesday, March 10th. This year, we have 4 positions that are being elected. So there is one school board member seat for a 3-year term. And then there is a school district clerk for a 3-year, a moderator for a 3-year, and a treasurer for a 3-year term. So those will be on the ballot. And Michelle, when do people file for those seats if they're interested?
My thing with me.
Last week in January.
Last week of January usually.
Yeah. So fairly soon, end of the month. We'll get notice out as to when you can file for those seats. All right. So then Article 1, that brings us to the operating budget. And you can see that on Article 1 right now, the school board has not taken a position statement, and you'll see that the dollar amounts are all X'd out. That's because we have not finalized the budget, right? So we're waiting for that number to be finalized by the budget committee so that we know what to plug in for the first set of X's. And the default budget number has not been finalized yet by the school board. So we had preliminary conversation about it, and we're zeroing in on it, but we don't have a default number set. Article 2 is relative to the collective bargaining agreement. And I think if you look at what's there, it reflects what you were handed out last time relative to the support staff agreement with the year 1 and year 2 costs. The school board voted last night by a vote of 500 to recommend that to the taxpayers. And we're waiting your vote on that. And do you want to take those one by one and do your votes? Or do you want me to go through the whole overview? And
we're voting at it after the budget hearing, right?
Well, the only one that we could vote on is Article 2, since we did see that one last week. But it's the will of the committee is whether they'd like to vote tonight or after the budget hearing. All right. So next one. We'll run through them. So we'll
Yep.
because we
Perfect. So Article 2 is relative to a class size reduction. Expendable trust fund. The word guidelines should have been struck from that. So
Article 3.
Oh, sorry. That was
Article
my-
3, I'm sorry.
my bad.
Yes, Article 3. So strike the word guidelines from it. It's really a class size reduction expendable trust fund. We're proposing to put $99,000 in, which is the kindergarten teaching position, and only that. So our intent is to ask the taxpayers to take the money that we've already raised and allocated this year, or raised and appropriated this year, and to park that into the expendable trust fund. So notice it says at the end, the sum will come from the June 30th fund balance available to transfer on July 1st with no amount to be raised from taxation. And the school board voted 500 to recommend that to the voters.
Okay.
Article 4, shall the Litchfield School District vote to raise and appropriate up to $50,000 to be added to the Special Ed Capital Reserve Fund. So keep in mind that we're predicting at this point, and I say at this point, January, right? So we still have more than half the school year to go. And we're predicting to be in the red by about $50,000 with special ed, with unknown expenses still to come if a family were to relocate or what have you. So, what we expect we're going to have to do is to take that $50,000 out of the capital reserve fund in order to balance out, because we can't be in the red. We have to balance it somehow. That account has 104,000 in it.
Mm-hmm.
And then we want to replace the 50,000. So and again, that's a zero tax impact because we would be taking money left over in the unreserved fund balance on June 30th and transfer that back in. So Article 5 is to raise and appropriate the sum of $70,000 to be added to the operating budget for the purpose of funding a feasibility study. So our capital planning committee has been meeting. We've got some pretty good, solid, ambitious plans relative to some creative ways to address needs in our buildings. And we think that we're ready to take that a notch further, right? So it has to go beyond educators who are in charge of educating children, trying to figure out what it would cost to do a project, right? So we've got to have some experts who can come in, and we're going to ask the taxpayers. Notice that that's not from fund balance. That's asking the taxpayers to put an additional $70,000 aside so that we can do a proper feasibility study on our buildings. And I just want to share, I can't say this is where it's going to go, but we are being very creative at trying to find ways to address the needs at 2 of the buildings so that we can take care of those without a tax impact, and put those in a really good position for a 15 to 20 year window of time, so that we aren't asking for anything further at those 2 buildings. And then we have to pay attention to the neediest building and make a more long-term plan. And that's where the $70,000 would be helpful to figure out what that means. Now, does that mean we just have this open checkbook and we're spending $70,000? No. If we can get that work done for less money, then we will get the money done, or get the work done for less money. But we have to make sure that we do it correctly and spec it out correctly. And we need people with expertise to do that for us.
So have you spoken to somebody to obtain a budget number, or how did we come to $70,000?
So what we did to come up with that is we had some very rough preliminary conversations with people. It's so site specific that it's hard for somebody to come up with something on it. And you have to spend money to get an accurate number. So that's part of the problem, right? We looked at what we paid H.L. Turner to do the study for the district 5 years ago or somewhere in that window. And we then said, here's what we think would make sure that we were able to get the work done. That's where we got $70,000 from. But nobody's going to commit unless you contract with them to come in and say, here's what it would be. And there's so many moving parts still relative to what can we get done at other sites using the funds that we have. So it's really kind of, it's a number that we want to make sure we have enough to get the job done correctly, but we don't want to overshoot it either.
May I ask a question?
Absolutely.
Is there a reason why this is being added to the operating budget and not a set aside in the fund?
Well, I think what the board's stance was that the budget committee made it really clear that asking the taxpayers on warrant articles for things that need to get done was a very appropriate way to proceed, right? I mean, that was articulated to us. So that's why we're doing that. Could it come from fund balance?
I think it's a revolving fund, kind of like a.
Yeah, no, I'm sorry, I think you misunderstood. Like, to not put this directly in the school operating budget, but to create a sort of like Article 3 where you have a trust fund specifically for this purpose in this study. So it's not rolled into your operating balance.
Oh, I think the belief is that it's going to be used in 1 year time. So whereas a trust fund, I mean, I guess that's another approach, right? You could park it in there so that
it's dedicated for that purpose,
and it could be used for other additional studies down the road. So that's a possibility too. I hadn't thought of it from that lens. We were saying we're going to get it done next year, so we're thinking operating budget. We just need to add that in. But
will this be a one-time expenditure, or will this be added to the operating budget and then brought into each following year's budget?
Well, so the feasibility study would be a one-time thing. We would not do additional feasibility studies down the road. So
no, but I'm saying the $70,000, will that come off of the following year's budget number? Because if you're adding it to a budget,
I think in a default calculation, we would see that as a one-time expenditure. So that's not something we would include going
I think
forward.
my personal opinion is it's cleaner to the taxpayer to have it in a trust fund and not rolled into your operating budget.
Well, I mean, if your fiscal year starts July 1st, correct? In order to be able to spec it, do your pre-construction and everything else, you're already into probably another year anyway. So it may be worth, just for clarity, and if you get it done in a year, then the trust fund's, it's exhausted in a year. That's great. But if it's not, then at least you don't have to worry about the mechanism of encumbering and whatnot. It's just a thought process.
Yeah, no, I appreciate that feedback. I think, as you can see, the board voted 5-0-0, but that doesn't mean they can't reconsider and restructure that based on that feedback too. So I also think that if the purpose is for school construction purposes, then let's say the feasibility study costs $50,000 and the $20,000 left could then be utilized toward the next, if there's some additional site work or some additional speccing that needs to be done, or architectural fees, et cetera. You're just going to utilize it. You have it already at that point. So it actually encourages us, I think, to do the best job we can as inexpensively as we can so that we can stretch it further if it's all there versus in the operating.
Yeah, that makes sense.
I saw, when we were doing the school walkthroughs, at LMS as an example, there was, you had a nice printout of the proposed future entrance of LMS with clear line of sight directly into the office. Is that rolled into what the $70,000 is planning for, or is this something completely separate?
That project?
Yes.
So if you remember, the school district got
Mhm.
school security grant money.
Yes.
And so we had that spec'd out for us. The cost of that project was about $320,000. So we didn't do it. We didn't have the funds to do that. And now the capital planning committee is saying, if I hate to say this, but if that's all we do, and at the end we still have portables sitting in the yard, and we still have mechanical issues in the building, have we spent the money the best it can be? And so now we're looking more globally to say, is there a way that we can tighten up on the energy controls and the mechanical needs of the building, get a front entrance, eliminate the portables, and be done at LMS for the foreseeable future. So it's a different lens on it. So we sort of parked that project and are thinking a little differently about how to proceed on it.
So globally, this would be included, this study would include any changes to LMS, perhaps including that whole entrance study again.
Perhaps.
I think Nikki's going to give us an update on where it stands, so we can probably get more detail in a bit.
All right.
Yeah, and I'm not trying to be. I'm not trying to avoid that. It's literally
Still exploratory. So.
It's exploratory, and it's but it's exciting. It's exciting exploratory. I think we're landing in a good spot on it.
I love pre-construction. So many possibilities. I love it. Probably other than completion, one of my favorite parts.
When, so we met with a consultant yesterday, and they hear that we're spending $36,000 a year renting the portables at LMS, and they're like, "You've been doing that for how long?" I'm like, "Oh, it seems like a long time."
That's a sore subject in town.
Well, it is,
Yeah.
and the point is, it's time to stop that.
Yep.
Those were temporary solutions 20 years ago, and here we still are. And I say to myself, so 10 years later, we're $360,000 further in the hole with portables ready to fall down, frankly.
Part of the lease can't we watch? So.
And so is it not time to say, how do we leverage that money in a more cost-effective way to address the building need there once and for all? That's the conversation that we're having. And imagine if we could do that without a tax impact. And by that, that's tax dollars.
Mm-hmm.
We're going to pay it anyway. I mean, we have to have somewhere for the 5th grade, so we're paying that. But why not pay that in a way that gets other needs addressed? So that's where we're trying to head.
No, turn it into an asset instead of liability. Absolutely. All right.
Okay, on 5?
I think so.
So Article 6. Article 6 and 7 are 2 security-related measures. So Article 6 is specifically to raise and appropriate $35,000 to purchase and install door barricade security devices for interior classrooms. So during our school security training, if there were to be an intruder in the building with intent to harm staff and students, our training protocol includes that at some point you do have to lock down. You have to kind of shelter in place and secure the space that you're in. So we've been trained on how to do that. We can figure out how to take this table and use it as a barricade and so forth, so that somebody can't get into a room. But this device, this barricade device, is a pretty slick device that will accomplish 2 things. It will secure the door from the inside very quickly. And the other thing is that there's a tool the police and fire department have that will allow them to unlock it, right? So therefore, if I, stack tables and take my belt and tie things off and do all these other things, the police and fire have a hard time responding because now I've secured it in a way that they can't get in, right? So the point of these devices is that they are able to get past it very quickly and come in and help in that situation. So it's a $35,000 price tag. It's not inexpensive, but in reviewing it with the board, we're looking at, I think the device is $62 a piece. We're estimating the cost of installation to be about $69 times the number of doors, and you quickly add that up to $35,000. And so that's why we're asking the public. And in this case, we are, doesn't really say to be added to the operating budget. I don't know if it needs to, Michelle. No. So it's just, it is an additional warrant article. But we felt, again, here's a fairly high cost item, but it's also children and staff lives. It's a security device. It's the kind of thing that we've not put in the budget because we're trying to pay attention to other needs. But this is one that, is this what the public would like us to invest in to make sure that we're safe and secure in the schools? So we thought it was the type of warrant article that could stand on its own. And you can see the board has recommended at 500.
Can I just add too that we've consulted with the police chief and other emergency responders in town, and this device was endorsed by them.
Not only endorsed, when we were initially doing our training, the fire department in particular said, we don't like some of the, so there was a little bit of a disagreement between police and fire, because the police are saying, do what you have to do to protect yourself. And fire is saying, but don't make it so complicated that we can't respond to help somebody who's hurt. So, it's like, yeah, great that you can, we could secure this room really quickly, but then if somebody had to get in here, it would be cumbersome to unsecure it, right? So what fire said is this is the only endorsed device by the fire department that doesn't violate fire codes and allows us to get in when we need to. So therein lies why we ended up with that. And, we could be spending a ton of money buying devices for people to complicate entry into a room. So you're going to spend the money anyway. Why not spend it on the device? It might cost a little more, but it's the device that is compliant with fire department regulations. So they actually, we were in a meeting with police and fire, and fire's strong recommendation was this is what you want to do.
Okay.
Does this include a door upgrade, or what is this device? Is it like a deadbolt, electronically controlled?
It's not electronic. It's a mechanical device, but think of it as a deadbolt. But it's not built into the door frame. It doesn't involve altering the door. It latches on and is secured to the door and to a device in the floor. So it sort of is a drop and lock so that it secures it.
So it would be universal.
My comment is, during our walkthrough, we looked at some doors that were outdated, able to be broken through very easily. So if we're trying to secure the students, have we addressed those doors as well?
This is for
We haven't,
outside
and
open
most of
door?
those doors were internal corridor doors. So we're only installing these on the doorway to the hallway. And so it would be the responsibility of the teacher to latch that door and make sure that their perimeter doors were also secure. And that's where I hate to call them closet doors, but they really were not a good, secure, soundproof door from classroom to classroom, right? So, but we're not going to install that on there either, because frankly, people need to be able to exit into another,
Breach the perimeter.
it's another egress, right? So it's just locking the perimeter is the way to think.
This is what the inside, this is what a door opening out looks like, the night long.
So hold on, I think I can pull it up here.
But it'll work on all of the doors. We don't have to retrofit any doors to accept it.
No.
Okay.
And then there's another one that looks like, yeah, you can put it up there. There you go. So
Well, I'd
everybody
rather
can see
not.
it.
To be honest, I'd rather not.
Okay.
There's a certain amount of how much do we want to publish,
Right.
what our
This
security
is true.
plan is. If people,
Anybody can Google it though.
Right.
So
Yeah,
But-
they have one for outward opening doors and one for inward opening doors.
Yeah.
And not even, even if the intruder broke the window, they can't reach it because it's down low.
it's a security device that you have to be somewhat careful how much you are discussing.
So
Yeah.
quick math, that's about 258-9 doors, something like that. A lot of doors.
There's a lot of doors.
Yeah,
We're
a lot of
talking
doors.
all
A
three
lot of
schools. That number, the 35,000, addresses all the doors in the district. So that's a one and done.
plus office.
Everybody's got the device. Yeah, offices, except any occupied space.
It's transportable. So in the event we talk about new construction, whatever it might be, that it's a
You
matter
are
of
100% correct.
removing and reinstalling.
Yep.
Excellent.
And then Article 7 is also a security measure. And so we've come up with a 3-year plan. And the 3-year plan involves 3 schools, obviously. Our goal is to start at the middle school and to do a proper Grandmaster Key
Don't move to card swipes.
process, not card swipes. We're talking about classroom door locks, which involves a good old fashioned key.
Okay.
And so basically, keep in mind that middle school was open in, I don't know, 1988. So you're talking locks that have been opened and closed over and over for 30 plus years. The tumblers have tired. They've been gradually swapped out. This one's been replaced. That one's been replaced. That one's been replaced. That master wasn't available anymore. So now that's on a different master. It's a jumble of keys over at the middle school, to the point that it was actually, again, raised by police and fire, because in order to get down the hallway, so the smoke doors that close when the fire alarm goes off, they close and lock. And there are different master keys because that core is no longer available to purchase. It was proprietary to some company back in 1992, and you can no longer have that. So now you have that master key, but you have to know that that's the master key to get through that door. And then you come to the next door and it's not that master key, it's a different master key. It's a jumble over there. And so our need is to make sure that all the door locks work properly, to come up with it's sort of a laddered grand design. So you could envision that there's like a grand master for the district that just gets you in everywhere. Few people would have that key, but it's a secure key, down to a building level master, down to what a teacher may have. So there could be a classroom master key that would open, all the sixth grade teachers may have the key to the sixth grade doors kind of thing. The gymnasium would be on a different key. And so all of these things can be laddered and structured in a way that you can control the security. There's not a lot of control currently, and it's just because it's been put together so many times. And so we price that out and estimate $25,000 to recore, which is the cylinders and the keys, both the interior and exterior doors. That's just at LMS. And our plan would be to do CHS the year after, and then to see where we are. Quite frankly, the biggest key jungle is GMS, because it's the oldest building with the most additions and the oldest locks. But we're going to hold off on that in terms of rekeying experience to see where we land. So it's a 3-year plan, $25,000. That will take care of one school next year. And this is also an additional ask of the public. There is no Article 8, so you don't have to look for it.
Did the school board not vote on Article 7? How is that?
On Article 7, they did not, because the dollar amount was calculated today. We talked last night about this is something that's above and beyond. We didn't incorporate it in. Is this something you'd be interested in? They said, what are you looking at? And I checked it and said, I just need a little more time to get a solid number in. So they didn't want to vote until we had a solid number. My prediction is that they support the concept, and the dollar amount wasn't outside of what the thought process was.
Okay.
So once we got it nailed down,
I
think they would be supportive of it.
I think we're supportive of that one
Okay.
as well.
All right.
Back to Article 2, will this committee consider voting on Article 2, or do you want to perform all voting on warrants at the end of the budget hearing next week?
We'd like to take some feedback and input. So how does the committee feel on moving forward with that?
I'd rather see tax impacts. How much it's going to cost people. If you don't have an estimated tax impact, what's going to cost the taxpayer?
I'm sorry, for Article 2? For Article 2?
Yes,
for
All of them, none of them have an estimated tax impact. So if our job is what is it going to cost the taxpayer? There's none of it's on here. So how can you say
we
do that or?
We did inform the committee last time that was 8 cents per thousand for Article 2. It's not typed in here, but the cost impact of Article 2 is 8 cents per thousand. The others we haven't calculated out. Honestly, the business administrator is not here tonight. He was sick today, and so that held that up. But we could.
But
Well,
with
if you could-
that,
Right.
if it's 67,000, you're for 8 cents per thousand, right? 99,000 is going to be about 10 cents.
Well, realistically, the only one by our bylaws we can vote on is Article 2. We can ask them to send out an updated version of this before the budget hearing with the actual tax
Yes.
impacts.
Yeah, so that's what I'd like to do is send that to you, but Andrew's going right where I was,
Yeah.
which is if 67,000 is 8 cents, 99,000 is about 10 cents.
It's ballpark.
You know, just ballparking.
Article 5 is 8 cents. Right, so.
Article 6, you know,
4
or the
cents.
keys are about 3 cents. I mean, so
But so the question before the committee now is, do we wish to vote a recommendation on Article 2, or do you want to wait until the meeting after the budget hearing when we vote on the rest of them as well?
Look, I'm all in favor of getting done tonight what we can, so I will make a motion to approve Article 2 as written.
All right. All right. So Andrew made the motion and Nikki seconded. Additional discussion, comments?
I just want to say that this is, you know, the support staff went without a contract for a year, and this was a hard one, you know, a really, I want to frame it positively, but this was a hard won battle for both sides kind of thing. Both the negotiation team for the school board and the LSSA worked on numerous, unthinkable hours to get this a fair agreement and ratify it by their representative bodies. So I really expect, and I really hope that, you know, the recommendation is favorable by the school board. I think it makes a big difference. Budget committee. What did I say? School board? Oh, we recommended it. Yeah. But like Mike mentioned at the last meeting, these are your friends and your neighbors and people who live in town for the most part. And it means a lot to them to have a contract, and it means that we can move forward with, you know, with contracts in hand and everyone happy. So I appreciate your thought and consideration and recommendation.
Any comments?
I thought getting the wage schedule today, not, I'm calling it a work thing, getting the, what did you send to us?
The ladder, salary ladder? Or
Yeah, I thought it was like eye-opening to just kind of put perspective as to what these folks get paid to actually work in our schools. So
I do want to thank the support staff, though, for, I understand that switching insurances, especially next year, because you're staying on, the first year will remain correct in the second year. And just, I appreciate the willingness to work with the district on that, because I know it was a painful change for a lot of the teachers, and I appreciate that the support staff, as painful as it is and scary, is willing to take that risk and to work with the taxpayers, because it has been a long-term goal of the budget committee, as we've discussed last time we did a contract, to try to tighten up the costs of health insurance. And so I appreciate the willingness of the support staff to help us achieve that goal. And as Jen said, seeing the salary ladder was definitely very, very interesting. So I to the point where I understand now why there are some staffing issues. So I do appreciate everybody's hard work and coming to the table and getting it as something squared away that we can put before the voters. So I know nobody's favorite job is to do the union negotiations. So hopefully we can get a square, buy some time to the next one. So
Yeah, this is a 2-year contract.
Right.
And we were smart. This is a 2-year contract. The teachers are on a 3-year contract. So we won't be doing 2 at the same time.
Oh, actually, we will.
What?
yes, because it's
Sorry.
2 years.
Wait, I quit. What?
They're in year 1 now, and so
Oh,
yeah,
year one.
we were
I thought you
hoping.
intentionally did that so you'd get all the pain done at once. Just stop talking.
I have 2
She's
more
still
years.
fried. She's still fried from the last one.
I am. I'm
Sorry
a
to burst your
frazzled.
bubble over there, but yeah.
PTSD.
All right, so we have a motion and a second. Are there any additional comments relative to the article? All right, hearing none. All those in favor of recommending Article 2, please indicate by saying aye. Opposed? And abstain. So the motion passes 8-1.
801.
801. You're right, it's not 8-1, 801.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you very much. I mean, honestly, obviously getting the right people on board on our staff is critical. As you mentioned, there are still openings that we've had all year long, right? So just having stability in labor relations is so important. I can't do my job if I can't get good people in the school. So, and the board is just 100% committed. So an 8-0-1 vote is so strong. And I hope the public now just turns out and supports that, because that really sends a strong message. So thank you for that.
All right. So we have done, so do we have any update relative to the default budget, or will that be something Corey ends up having to email?
So we're plugging to get the default budget done. The budget hearing is next week, so we're going to have something in there in order to present that to the public, right? So yeah, we need to get it right, and it's not there yet. So we're going to keep working until we get it right.
All right. So then we sent along some questions relative to the budget review. In particular, the question about the supplies line. There was a request for clarification as to the 3-year increase. And I believe that was the supply line 610 in particular. If you had some additional feedback.
So our team is ready to talk in general about some of these pieces, but I'd like to come back to our school board rep.
Yeah.
I think,
if you don't mind, if we could kind of put that aside and move on to the just budget discussion.
Well, we're moving into the budget. So are you ready?
Are you prepared to make motions?
I am.
All right. So before you make motions, may I ask just to summarize what all the motions are, and then we can actually do
Do you want to
voting?
bring your?
No, I don't have them. So
No, I'm seeing the overall chart because it was
Right.
nice to see.
yeah,
them.
well,
So what I have are 5 motions to restore some of the money from the cuts that were made by the budget committee into specific line items. And and I know our experts are here if you have questions, and they're ready to explain why those cuts, why those restorations are needed and kind of critical for the
by
district.
account or by function, or
This
how do you
is by,
account.
account? All right, that's fine.
thank you, sorry.
I'm ready.
Okay, so number 1, I'd like to move to restore $9,224 to 519 transportation for vocational programming.
All right. There's a motion. Is there a second?
Second for discussion.
Okay. So made and seconded.
So I'm going to start by just explaining what we did with the cut that was made by the budget committee, why we've identified this as an important add back. And then I'm going to ask the educational experts who are prepared to speak to this to come up and join me and to explain the impact on the budget. So
Just to summarize, I'm sorry to interrupt, right? This is an area where this committee cut $30,000 from 519 transportation.
So we're looking.
So
to
if we look at the
restore
screen, you'll
9,000.
see that the committee cut $30,000 from 519 transportation. We then took that as a,
I don't know where.
it's right up in the corner. It says cut by budget committee, 30,000, right? And so we took the 30,000 and back allocated that against the various lines. So we said, what percent of the 30,000 should be allocated back to each line based on what percent they were of the overall total in transportation. So that produced what you see over in boldface, where it's the transportation lines. And the one that I'm speaking about here is the one in red at the top, because that got back allocated to vocational transportation. That's roughly, it's actually 30.75% of the overall cut got allocated back to vocational, because that was the proportional share. Now, here's the problem. Vocational ed is a requirement, right? So we have to transport our students off to vocational ed, and we transport in 2 directions. We go to Alburn for some students, we go to Pinkerton for other students. It's not unlike a regular bus route. It's not unlike picking students up and driving them to school. We're driving them to class where their class is being held. And so our concern is that that portion of it is something we cannot easily absorb, because it's a mandatory requirement for us to drive the students to the sending school or to the receiving school. And so now I'm going to ask the high school principal to talk a little bit about why is it that we have vocational ed, and what is it that we gain by having Campbell High School students attend school at Alburn and at Pinkerton.
Good evening.
Good evening.
So a couple of different things. One, I think one of the first things we look at is when we think about vocational ed, it's actually an incredible value for our students to go there. When you look at what we pay for credit at the high school, you're talking generally it's about $2,500 a credit, approximately $15,000 over a year for 6 credits for a student. We pay $1,000 essentially to the CTE centers for a student to go and to take a course there. It's a 2-credit course, so essentially we're paying $500 a credit for those students to go there. So one, it's an incredible value. 2, we don't know in terms of our scheduling how many students we send from year to year. It ranges from anywhere from 38 to 42 to 44. And it really depends on your sophomore class, current sophomores, because they're the ones who are going to have the presentation in the coming weeks, and they're the ones who are going to sort of take in this information about what the possibilities are. One of the things we always talk about in high schools is college and career opportunities. And the CTE programs are amazing programs for students, many of whom who take it as a supplement to strong academic programs, but many of whom the traditional classroom setting is a challenge for them. Okay, they want the hands-on things, whether you're talking about welding, TV and video productions, if you talk about the kids who are doing cosmetology, health science technology, or in the case of some of our kids, you know, they're at Albert and they're doing heavy machinery mechanics and auto mechanics. So I think oftentimes what gets lost in the college is those other opportunities for other kids. And so it's really important that we pay attention to this piece of our programming for them. And as Mike said, it is a required part of the minimum standards. So it's important that we do that. I want to speak on a little bit of a personal basis here. Okay. I am one of 3 brothers, 2 sisters, and I have one of my youngest brother who was the last guy in graduation who wasn't sure he was going to make it. And what kept him in school was his electrical courses. He is an amazing human being who is the successful one in the family, not the college-educated guy who's the high school principal, okay? And he's the guy who was saved by these things. So I think it's really important. You have to look at those programs and you have to commit to them. And one of the important pieces is committing to the transportation. And that's a challenging cost. One of the things we found previously is trying to get bus companies who are willing to commit to that. And you end up paying a little bit more for during transportation or because first you can't afford to do it. So that's one of the challenges we had in this past year. So I'm respectfully asking you to, that money, it's important that we make sure that we keep that money in the budget.
And also prepared to speak is our Director of Curriculum, Mary Whitman, who will sort of talk about the personalization piece of it and the fact that these are programs that are so unique, we can't run them in our school. We have to go out to get them.
And that's a big push across the state is really, we know what the college path is. We've been touting that for years, but really pushing our students into, we're seeing an increase in need for skilled tradesmen and women, excuse me. But that is an area that it's a really personalized path for kids. And, you know, as we look at our curriculum and as we look at our programming, we are moving and continuing to move towards providing as much personalization as we can to students so that they are getting what they need out of their education in Litchfield. This is a huge piece of that. We do not have the facilities and the capacity to run an automotive program out of Campbell High School. It's not feasible. It is required, as I have the Ed 306 minimum standards up, but we can't, it's not something that we have the capacity right now to do, and to build a CTE center so that we don't have to spend the money on transportation seems like that's going to be a much bigger cost. So I think we have to think about all of our students, and this is a population of our students that it is very, very important that we have opportunities for them.
Can I add a little comment? The really positive thing for us is when our students do really, really well in those programs. And I always say this about Litchfield kids, they're great kids and they really work hard. We had a student who went to the Nationals, for Skills USA in welding. He was inducted into the Pinkerton CTE Honor Society. We have 3 students at Pinkerton in the cosmetology program who are also being inducted into their honor society. So it's not just good hands-on craftsmen, those types of things. We also have kids doing exceptionally well in them.
And I think just one final point is that, remember, these are regional vocational centers. We enjoy location, location, location. We're talking a few miles in one direction, a few more miles in the other direction, but we're not in the position where some districts are doubling or tripling this amount of transportation because you're sending so far away. So actually, we're able to even pick up a couple of extra seats because students don't mind being on the bus for as long, and we can get them there more efficiently. And again, it's a bargain. You're leveraging federal Pell Grants that are funding those centers. They're funding them anyway, right? And so why would we not send students there to pick up the credits that is unique to what they want to do, when we're just asking to make sure that we've got the transportation budget to be able to do that.
Any comments?
Yeah, so this is the feedback I was hoping for, right? So I've expressed my concern about the cuts that were made and being a little bit too deep. I appreciate Mr. Harrison's presentation earlier that kind of, gave us a little bit more perspective from 3-year trends. And this is the kind of thing where I hear this and I think, and I know some of the kids that participate in this, and this is so much less expensive than us trying to fund this ourselves. And this is something, it helps, like restoring this helps me to think differently about the whole kindergarten proposal. I don't know, I don't want to open a whole can of worms, but I'm just saying, like, this seems worthwhile to me, so.
So my view, right, is, we didn't dictate how this was spread out, right? I understand you used the methodology to apply the 30,000 logically across 6 out of the 8 accounts, right? What's not included in here is special education transportation, as well as the general district-wide contracted, bus routes, right?
Right, so we have 1.17, right?
Wait, right, but so our problem, my issue with this specific account, right, not attributed to these lines as presented, has nothing to do with vocational, right? It's actually athletics, and that's where our conversation was, right? Because our athletic budget for transportation went up skyrocket, right? And if I look back even the past few years, it's $30,000 higher, right? And as we talked about, right,
because we added 2 new programs, girls and
well,
boys
that's
lacrosse
it,
are now
right? So
self-funded.
right, so
Or
there are
no longer self-funded. they're
right.
now
So there
funded.
are new programs that are driving costs, right? There's other things that are a part of that, right? But that's why we're seeing a large increase. It was really the substantial, the reasoning behind a part of that motion, right? Again, I didn't make a specific motion, nor did this committee on vocational, right? That's how it was applied.
But the
But
transportation,
that's the impact of it. That's
Yeah.
the impact. when we make
My
it.
adjustment would be to increase your reduction in athletics and not in vocational.
But how do you, because and I'm sorry, I'm passionate about this because I'm a lacrosse coach, but because the lacrosse program got added after 5 years of self-funding, you're going to penalize all of athletics because we now offer 2 new amazing programs for Campbell High School students.
I'm not penalizing anything. I think it's over budgeted. I'm not saying remove the program or remove the service.
But you can't use a 3-year average on a program that wasn't funded by the district 3 years ago.
Well,
Or 2 years ago.
and also keep in mind, it's a new contract, right?
Right.
So the new contracted amount has gone up. So therefore, the last year of the 3-year average, the year we're in right now, is higher. And so that skews it right there. So that it's definitely a piece that we had to say, what's the fair way to take a $30,000 cut and apply it? And this is how we did it, by doing it proportionally. Does that mean that transportation may run out of funds? Absolutely. We're already, I can't remember what number Corey had last time, but I think he told you in the fall that we were several $1,000s over what was budgeted because of the extra contract costs, right? So we're already facing that reality. And then taking this cut is going to hurt further. But notice what our team's doing for a second. We are zeroing in on the educational component of it. So we're saying we can, I don't know how, but we'll figure athletics out. If that means that we've got to fundraise, if that means that we have to user fee, if we have to do something to make sure that we're able to do this, and that's where we're going to have to go because we're not going to have the money, or that's the reality of it, right? But transportation for regular education of students going to the voc centers is where we said we can't absorb that. We can not run a field trip. We can ask the PTO to help fund a field trip, but we can't ask parents to pay for transportation to class. That's not reasonable. That's why we're here. We're not asking you to restore 30. We're asking you to restore 92.24.
I think you can absolutely ask parents to pay for sports. I mean, I know you don't want to, but if you look at this town, you go drive that high school, I don't see any broken down cars at all. Everybody's driving, there's BMWs there, Civics, brand new cars.
You see my car?
It's not pretty, Mike. It's not pretty.
No, but see, that's smart, because I had a boss who used to do that. He'd walk through the parking lot and see how well he was funding his salaries
You think
of
about
his
it, they all
employees.
have cell phones that
So
are
very smart.
like $500. Jesus.
Go ahead.
They have cell phones that are $400 or $500. They have the money to do this. You can't say that the parents in this town don't have money to fund if their kid wants to participate in athletics. And as your budget said, you can move the money wherever you want. So you can do it. You just don't want to. But if you charge kids, I mean, and if you said there's a set of parents, you set an income level or something like that, where if they're below this certain income level, then fine, they qualify for a different amount. It certainly can be done. But you're asking taxpayers to pay for this when there's other ways to do it.
All I want to say is that if you're recommending to the school board that we start charging kids to play sports, please come say that at a school board meeting and claim it as your idea, because they will come out with pitchforks and torches. This is an athletics-based town, and parents and the community is very, very supportive of our athletics program. And
Then pay for it.
I'm reminded of the conversation that Mr. Myers spoke to in reference to this committee about, having good, solid sport programs drives further involvement, or it gets kids enrolled, gets kids, keeps them busy after school. And that's important, right? And I'm just, I'm thinking about that conversation as well.
Yeah.
That also keeps them academically eligible.
Absolutely.
Right.
Right.
They
There's
work hard.
motivation.
Actually saying that if they had to pay $50 or $100 to play a sport, they can't afford that. And so at that,
I would
that's
honestly
$50
say
or $100.
Some would.
I would honestly say that would affect a number of students, and we would not have the participation that we do.
Then don't participate. Pay for what you use.
So as a coach at Campbell, I experienced it. I experienced kids who couldn't play when we were a self-funded sport because it was pay to play, right?
Mm-hmm.
So it is a real issue. Not everyone has the funds to be able to play, but the thing so we're talking right now about adding in money for transportation, for VOTEC programs, like not athletics.
I understand
This
that.
isn't
When
about
you look
athletics.
at that, it isn't, but it is, because they can take the money from any one of those lines and they can put it towards vocational. It doesn't have to go to athletics. So you can take that money from athletics and go to vocational. You certainly can.
Well,
You can move it.
But
they said that they have the power to move their money. It's a bottom line budget. So they can take their money and put it wherever they want. I'm simply saying, in a town where the median income or median house value is probably well over $350,000 to $400,000, that and kids, like I said, they have cell phones, they have tablets, they can afford $50 to $100. And if there's a certain level where you are at an income level they don't qualify for that, then fine, subsidize that. But don't say that they can't afford it.
And I would just say that's a larger discussion outside of
It-
us.
it's
Like
Yeah.
that's a school board. Like if you feel strongly about that, then go to the school board and tell them, I think athletics should be self-funded. The proposal in front of us is about adding
For
9,000
transportation.
for
You want to add money back in for transportation. It's
So-
not lost. I mean, I understand it. So, but transportation is more than just the vocational athletic. They're saying that they're going to be negative 92.24. They don't have to be. They can take the money from other spots to put it towards that.
So the overall transportation account, I see it was 1.17 million. So there are a number of lines there that aren't showing up.
Well, there's two,
Okay, so special ed.
right? Because let's keep in mind that our special education transportation, yes, but also a large
The
portion of that is the contract, which is $570 or so thousand dollars.
and athletic transportation is also by contract.
Yes.
So when you did your analysis, there was no way whatsoever to absorb the additional 9,224.
Well, we could say we're not going to cut it there, but now I'm telling you, the athletic line, that $14,000, it's not going to work. We're going to have to cut somewhere else to move it in there to cover the athletic transportation, or come up with an alternative way to fund the athletic transportation, such as a user fee or a pay to play sort of scenario or something. We're going to have to entertain all those pieces, right?
Fundraising. I mean, it is something to say that
Fundraising
they're not
Yep.
asking to restore the full 30. I think that is something. And we also need to also keep in mind the school board made a reduction. They did the athletic transportation before it even got to us.
Yep.
So it isn't something that, was just thrown out there and accepted.
No, we don't like it. That's going to be hard to work with. But when push came to shove, we did the equitable
They're telling us what the priority
analysis, and that is a different line than the other lines: co-curricular, athletics, vocational.
I think too, it goes back to Mr. Harrison's comments earlier. It's about the risk, right? We can fund, we can squeak by, but we already know that that's too little. We need that money, so that's why we're requesting the restoration. And we operate in a deficit. We have to find the money somewhere else, and educational programming will be affected.
Sorry, I'm processing and taking a moment. I don't want to rush through. So does anybody else have any other comments or things they'd like to hear? We have a motion on the table. It's been seconded. So hearing no further discussions, all those in favor of restoring $9,224 to the transportation account 519, please indicate by saying aye. Aye. Opposed?
Aye.
So it passes 6-3.
Thank you for that. That's very much appreciated.
So I have a motion. My next motion is to restore $4,174 to account 272 workshops.
So in this case,
We don't have a second.
oh,
I
sorry.
will second it for this.
Oh, yeah. So I'm sorry. How much was that again?
$4,174
Oh, okay. You have it right there.
272.
to line 272 workshops.
Yep. The one in red right there.
So basically, the budget committee cut $20,000 out of our workshop professional development line, and it was actually combined with travel, right?
Yes.
So it was 10,000 from workshops, 10,000 from travel, but it was a $20,000 motion and cut. You can see that we did the same proportional analysis back. So we took each individual line and said how much of the overall cost, what's the percentage, and then we took the $10,000 piece and allocated it back. You'll notice that right here is the $4,174 cut. There's the 10 plus the 10 in travel comes to 20. So then here they are listed out. And the line that we're most concerned about is the one in red, which represents the workshop line for curriculum. And we're asking you to restore that. So that's our rationale. We did exactly the same equitable back feed to figure out how to allocate that in to various lines, and both our Director of Curriculum, Mary Widman, and our Director of Special Ed, Devin Bandersky, is here, and they're going to walk you through what the impact is and the way we had done the movement of the money before it got here.
So as I explained when I presented my budget originally, I came on board in July of 2018, and we were very much siloed. We had 3 different buildings that functioned completely separately. And one of the things that I was tasked with was to help to unify us as a district in our priorities and where we're moving in the way we do business, basically in our instruction and in our in our training. So over the last 2 years during the budget process, I have taken all of these pockets of district PD funds or school-based PD funds that have existed in the different building and department budgets, and really condensed most of them into the district line so that we can do things as a district. And it's not having to say, if you want to send somebody from GMS, it has to come from your budget. We want to do this as a district, but you have to take it from here. You have to take it from here. You have to take it from here, because it's going to limit how many people can go. That's the reality of it. So this gives us much more, it gives me much more oversight to be able to say, we want to do this. This is important to us as a district. And I want to ensure that we are taking 2 people from the elementary level, 2 people from the middle level, 2 people from the high school level. It makes it more equitable in our training, and it's allowed us to do some really amazing things so far. I mean, it's been a year and a half, but I can tell you that we have been able, using those workshop monies specifically, we've been able to send all of our building principals to a common workshop on leadership, so that the language that we use in evaluation, the language that we use in talking to teachers about instruction is common in all 3 buildings. We have sent all of our new teachers in 512 that teach any tech courses to 5 different Project Lead the Way trainings. We can't access the actual curriculum because it is a canned program that we pay for, but we can't access, those teachers can't access it until they go through the Project Lead the Way specific training. Those are not cheap. They're not. And with the rate that we have teachers, coming in, or new courses coming in, it's really important that we have that ability to do that. Science, the push across the state has been NGSX, inquiry-based science. We have not just focused on sending a couple high school people. Science isn't up for curriculum revision until next year, but it's important because we want to build the capacity across the district. We have sent elementary, middle, and high school teachers to be trained, and administrators to be trained in this inquiry-based process, so that when our kids get to the high school, this isn't brand new, and which is what we have been finding along the way. I talked about, we've sent our language teachers to OWL, an immersion language instruction program, which we're continuing to build their capacity so that we actually are using the target. I heard you guys talking about it. I'm a former Spanish teacher. So you're absolutely right.
Spanish earlier.
I almost started speaking back, but then I found out I could.
I'm so sorry.
I know. But you're totally right. And the way that we get kids that leave Campbell High School and leave our middle school is being able to use the language, is to use the language in class. And we need to better train and give our teachers capacity to not be afraid to be using the target language from day one. We've run a data camp. We sent 25 staff members across all 3 buildings to Competency Design Studio this past summer. We ran a Live to Learn Academy for a week where we trained 44 different staff members from all levels, support staff through administrators in technology and curriculum, both the bones of the UBD process, but also in writing the curriculum itself. Just to highlight a couple more things that we've done. And again, these are all things that cost money and that have come from this budget line. We've sent our tutors to dyslexia training. We've done zones of regulation training, as well as additional social, emotional, and trauma-informed trainings, because that is something that is new to most of us. It is preparing our staff to be able to deal with what students are bringing into the classroom on a daily basis is really important. And we're seeing things that are different than even 5 years ago. Wilson Foundations training for our teachers K through 3. We trained K and 1 last year. We're going to train 2 and 3 this year. Math coaching. We have a brand new math curriculum. We have provided some math coaching across the district K-12 so that we have, again, common language with instruction and things of that nature, so that it's not, well, when I go to this grade, to this grade, to this grade, I'm hearing all new language. We're bringing that, really trying to tighten up that consistency. So I just wanted to highlight a few of the things that we've been using this money for. It's not willy-nilly. It is not, I really like this person, I'm going to send it one teacher to do this. This money has been used to send teams so that we have that consistency as a district, and we can talk the same talk and walk the same walk we were not doing that a year and a half ago when I came in. I'll be completely honest. We were not. And we still have room to grow, but we are really moving in the right direction. And I think that kind of a cut that deep too, and you can see that's where the majority of that cut has to go, because it's where the majority of the money is.
I just want to say too, when I was watching the budget committee meeting where that cut was made, it broke my heart. I'm the professed curriculum geek on the school board. And this is an area, this is what's going to make our schools better. You know, we spend all this money on our paying and providing benefits for our teachers, but if they can't improve their instruction and we don't collaborate as a team across the district, we're stuck. We're teaching in 1982, forever. This is how we move on and how we keep our kids competitive with other schools around us who are teaching to prepare these kids for careers that don't even exist right now. So this is key. I mean, this is how our schools improve.
And that's the truth. I mean, being new to Litchfield is an amazing community. I'm coming from a much bigger community, much more diverse community that is, it's a gem here. We could be one of the top performing districts in the state, without a doubt, but it's going to take us all moving in the same direction. And we can't do that without providing our teachers with the capacity to know what's the latest and greatest in education. Because the reality is, I mean, I've been teaching for 20 years. It's so different. I look back at what I did when I started teaching in 22 years, 97. And as somebody who now helps teachers become better, I was horrible. I'm embarrassed at the things that I did back then but that was what I didn't know any better. And it wasn't until I got the opportunity to start learning different things outside of what you learn in college that it really helped me become a better educator. So there is also a major impact in this cut to our professional development for special ed. And I know Devin is up here. She's going to talk a little bit about that. But I did want to make sure that you were aware that one of the things that the school board did was reduce the special ed was one of the major separate lines because their needs are different. That was reduced and moved into this line. So this is really not just the regular ed professional development. This is our district-wide, including special ed, which has some very different needs for training. I'm going to turn it over to Devin.
I think the only thing that I would add to it is there was a $6,000 cut to professional development for special services, with $3,000 being added into the curriculum portion of the budget. So when this cut was made to the curriculum portion of the budget, there is an impact to the professional development for special services. So there's a variety of trainings that we try to get our staff either sent to or bringing staff in to provide professional development, just because there is quite a variety of needs for our students with learning differences. So, we're fortunate enough that during different years, we're able to tap into grant funding we receive, but grant funding is unpredictable and we don't know what we're going to receive. So it's important to be able to have some funds to be able to direct someone to go, because I can't direct them to use their own personal allocations through the collective bargaining agreement. So I need to have some funds to be able to get staff trained in specific things. Even if it's a medical condition for a student, we have to be able to provide the right training to our staff so that we know how to work best with the student. So just, over the years, I've sent groups of staff to 6 professional development days throughout the scope of a year specific to specific learning disabilities. We started training staff in Orton Gillingham. We've done Wilson. We've had assistive technology trainings, a variety of mental health topics, including anxiety and depression. emotional disturbances, trauma, fostering resiliency, writing measurable IEPs, the legal aspects of things. So not to bore you, but there's a lot that we do in order to keep our staff up to speed with what's sort of best practice to assist our students. So I think that's all I have to say.
And just one final comment. Thank you to both of you. That was a great summary of all the stuff that we're doing. There's a mechanical piece to this, so that consolidation, right? So I've heard from the budget committee the concern that we're having too much money left at the end, so hence cuts, because you've got this fund balance at the end, right? Well, the likelihood that you're going to have a fund balance when there's a little pocket here and a little pocket there and a little pocket there, and now there's not enough left in any one of these pockets to really do anything, so it just sits there and it becomes part of a general fund balance at the end. We're trying to consolidate it so that one person, really in particular Mary, becomes the go-to and can globally make sure that we manage those funds in the most efficient way. And then it feels a little bit like the consequence back to here we are trying to consolidate it and move it around, and then it gets cut further, right? So the board already recognized by consolidating, we could cut several $1,000s out because there was money left in these pockets, right? So that's what the board did. And then it's a deeper cut. So we're not coming back saying we want all $10,000. We certainly would use it to train people. What we're saying is that allocation back to the curriculum line that Mary's overseeing is the one that we're asking you to restore, the $4,174.
So can we expect a similar motion on travel as well tonight?
You
No.
cannot.
That's one restoration for that.
And I will tell you, in talking with the team, I said what we have to do is learn to live within our travel budget. And so if that means that we're not going as far and we're finding closer training opportunities, and that's what we have to learn to take advantage of. One member of the team pointed out, in our contracts, we're guaranteed the opportunity to travel to a workshop, a national conference. And I said, yep, and that's a guarantee, and we're going to honor that. And if that means that we're cutting somewhere else in order to do that, that's a choice that we're making. So therein lies, how do we balance it all off? But we're not making a motion tonight relative to travel. I think there are a lot of good opportunities. Let's face it, we live in a great part of the country. Boston's not that far away, and you get some pretty darn nice national conferences that come nearby. So we just have to learn to live within that.
So my only comment here is it's not clear to me. It looks like if I add them up, there's 9,272 accounts on the screen here. If I look at the budget, there's actually 13 with funding. Right, there's 21 in total, but some of them have $0, $1 in them. I'm excluding all that. So with material funding in it, there's 13. I don't know what's not included in here that hasn't been allocated across the 10,000.
There are lines that are contractually obligated by the CDA. So we are obligated to have certain funding in for workshops available for the.
Isn't that what we just talked about?
No. So basically, there's a line in the collective bargaining agreement with teachers, and it says that you'll put into a fund for them to take coursework. There's a certain dollar amount, $250 times the number of people. And that creates a pool that's contractually, you're looking at it there. And then teachers who take courses can request to be reimbursed out of that pool. And that's a contractual amount. And basically, they're guaranteed, I can't remember the mechanism, but they get a certain amount initially, and then at the end of the year, if there are funds remaining in and people have not been fully reimbursed, then they can get reimbursed. So that account doesn't always spend to zero, but it could. It all depends on the number of courses that people take. There's another one for workshops that has a similar look to it. There's one, I think, for LSS for coursework. So those are, you said 3 lines, Andrew, that are missing?
Right. So the 4, right? So there's 9 here and there's 13 with funding.
So I just counted for 3 of them. Oh, it must be 2 for LSS, right? It's workshop and.
No, because we combined them this year. There's a 272 line for non-union, which we had already, that is also contractual, and we had cut significantly already.
I see one with a $5,000 reduction.
Yeah.
That's the principal
That
line.
was
instruction staff
that was the
training.
LSS line.
Okay.
We were able to do that because their contract reads differently. And there was one that we cut by, I believe, 4,000 initially. We did.
Could it be buildings and grounds? I don't think.
Oh, they do have a workshops and trainings line.
So Corey did the math. I can account for 3 of the 4 missing. But again, when our team met to review it, we zeroed in on what's in red, the curriculum line, because that's the greatest touch for our teachers and the training there.
2,900, that's benefits, okay. 2,840 is,
Because you had requested 272, just under 53.
Do you know grounds, building?
Last year's budget was about 61.
Custodial.
There was some combination
Facility
between
conferences.
Yeah,
They're very small.
So we combined.
Local.
So you combined, but we're still lower. So
Right. We
That
combined.
was the
Again, some of these have
amount.
zero.
Right.
Some of these have zero balance. So.
Yeah, because we
Alright.
cut,
Yeah. So I'm not even including
Alright.
those in 13.
we only send one person.
Well, I appreciate the
So that-
investment in our
that's
staff, and I think it will pay dividends, and it has. So I appreciate that,
District admin,
especially being a
that's the
priority
superintendent.
in improving. So are we?
School board,
we ready
don't
over there?
travel anymore. Yeah, I'm trying to guide him through the lines.
Are you? Have you? All right. I just didn't want to talk over you or not give you an opportunity to speak. So all right. So there's a motion on the table to restore $4,174 to account 272. Any other comments or questions before we take the vote? All right, hearing none. All those in favor of restoring $4,174 to account 272 workshops, please indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? So that passes 5-4.
Excellent. Thank you for that.
Yeah, paper. I have to line it up because I'm thinking I have more paper than I do. All right, that was 2. You said you had a few.
I make a motion to restore $20,056 to line 610 supplies.
Second for discussion.
So that was 20,000.
Yep, 56.
All right, yep.
Is that a full restoration?
Full restoration.
Yep.
So I'm going to explain how we applied that, and then I'll ask the principals to speak on the impact at their schools. And I think our facilities director, Dave, is prepared to speak to the impact on his department in this area, buildings, grounds, et cetera. So let me just start by looking at the chart again. So the full cut was the $20,056 here. We did the same percentage allocation back to the various lines and came up with the dollar amounts. And in looking at it, our request is that we get it all restored. And we're going to really talk about just the sheer number of things it takes to run a school district for the number of students that we have, and to keep everything clean and organized and so forth. And this is an area that cutting the margins too close on really is dangerous for us.
Are these rolled up numbers? Because there's 89 lines in the budget for supplies.
Totaling how much?
420,056.
So
There's quite a few supply lines like under the schools, it goes because the 610 is going to be under each.
Agree, but there's
subject.
what, 6 or 7 or 8 lines without clearly seeing, right?
Right.
Versus 90. So I
Understood.
again, apples to apples here. I don't know what is being restored versus the entire budget.
I mean, I think it's the conversation though is that they're asking for the full restoration. And
Wasn't that-
I think to remind the committee that there was a motion to amend down to a reduction
There
of
was
10,
for 10,
and
yes.
that failed as well. I think for different reasons.
And the only piece that I can say is that, again, Corey's the one who took the cut, backfed it to produce these numbers. And this is where the cuts have been made from. And so we're asking it to be restored back.
Yeah, if I may, it looks like it might be location. So I think after the 10, the 11 line is, am I right in this? That's GMS, and then the 21 is LMS, and then the 31s are, the 331s are CHS. So I'm guessing maybe CHS has 3 because one is athletics. And then
Right.
the other two, the 1100 and the 2610 lines,
That's custodial.
custodial and educational supplies.
Yeah. I guess let us go through what they are, and we would do exactly the same back feed if it's restored. We would put it back where we took it from. Andrew, I can't answer your question as to the other lines because I just don't know why Corey isolated these. I can only work with the spreadsheet that I have, but that's how we did it. So why don't we start with GMS and ask Principal Thompson to talk about the supplies and the methodology of how he goes about budgeting for them in the first place.
Thank you. So as I read that, our cut is from the general supply line. So we've talked about differences within the community. At the elementary level, we are driven to make sure that students who come into the school have the supplies they need. The thing that we would never want to happen is that we are depending on parents more and more to provide the supplies that the students need. And then we'd have students who are haves and have-nots when it comes to very basic things. We have always taken a very conservative approach to this. We use the actual numbers, and we have a small increase of the cost per student for the general supplies. This provides paper, so let's begin with that. We are not a one-on-one school. We actually have, for example, writing paper in multiple sizes. So when you think of the paper that kindergarten students would use or preschool students, we then move to a smaller paper. You're not writing on the big paper with the blue lines and the dotted red lines by the time you get to middle school. You're actually not writing on the really big stuff by the time you get to first grade. So we are still paper dependent. Some of our materials are have to be copied onto paper. They are masters. We still have that in some places. And so we've taken a very, again, conservative approach. And again, what I don't want to happen is that we have to depend on parents to provide this, because we do have disparities within our community, and they tend to be not seen all the time. But I can assure you that there are families who would struggle if we sent home a big long list of things that we need everybody to donate. We do, teachers do ask parents if they'd like to donate, because they ask. Sometimes they'll send in things like tissues. So my first argument for restoring this is around equity for students. I think that's really clear. My second argument is I'd like to share with you, if you're not aware, we still have teachers who supply materials for their classroom for things that are bought locally. So anything that's mass buying, we will buy through a purchase order system. We don't do a lot of reimbursement. So I know that teachers go to the dollar store, they go to Walmart or other large stores and buy materials for their classroom. I don't want to depend on that as the source of funding for supplies either. So I think that we are a supply-rich environment. Kids use lots of paper, glue, pens, pencils, markers, all of those things we supply at the elementary school. So I think it's important.
Scott, when Mrs. Leary's putting in the orders,
yes,
does she shop around and try to stretch?
Oh my, yes. So she is, I often sing her praises to her for being like the best shopper I know. And she can get prices down. She's actually changed vendors, even though we've had a long relationship with one, because what happens is it's like insurance, I think of it. If you're kind of blind to the fact that it's becoming more and more expensive, when you start shopping around, you find that another vendor will give you the same product for less. So she is right on top of that. I mean, incredibly so.
I have found there's usually the administrative assistants who are largely doing this. The teacher will say, I need this, and then they shop it and find the best they can. It's not a just order it from WB Mason because that's what we always do, right? So that's great to know.
Yeah. So.
Thank you.
Okay.
Principal Lecklider will talk about the impact of supplies at the middle school.
Actually, Dr. Jetty, looking at that list right there, there is nothing for general LMS. So can I defer to Dave when it gets to him?
You can, but if I point that out to the business administrator and he cuts you proportionally, do you want to say something before that happens? Because that's going to happen. If this is sustained, Tom, we're spreading the wealth.
So there was a reduction at LMS General Supply. So good evening, thank you. At LMS, if you look at our budget this year, I think it was last year, Ms. Burke raised the question about agendas and one-to-one and things like that. We were trying to be very conservative this year in our supply budget. We generally spend all of our money in supplies across the board, not just 610 general, but across the board our supply accounts. One of the ways that we did reduce a little bit this year was in our agendas, being that we were a one-to-one environment. We're going to go to more of a digital agenda next year for grades 7 and 8. That's just an example. To all the other points that Scott made regarding school supplies, it's basically the same thing. Though we are, being that we're one-to-one, we are trying to be responsible in that area. I say that, but I also commonly will tell parents that just because we are one-to-one does not mean no longer is there paper, no longer are there the basic supplies of a classroom or a school. So it does have an impact, particularly on us, because if you look at where we came in this year, we did come in under already a reduction in that area.
Thank you.
Just one general question, right? And so not for LMS specifically.
Okay.
But so this is an area of the budget, right, that is typically around $387,000, $388,000, $389,000. Right now we're up to $420,000 this year. But I think that's really then one of the main reasons for the reduction, right? Is why is it $30,000 higher, right? When we look at the actuals that are being spent for supplies. So more generic. I mean, again, our committee has nothing to do with this allocation, right? I understand it needs to fall somewhere and this is the choice. But again, there's 90 different lines here, right? You've chosen a handful. I have nothing to do with that, right? So help me understand why it's $30,000 higher.
Yeah. So let us finish the presentations. I think we're going to address that, right? Thank you.
Thank you.
Want to take your stab at it, and then we'll have Dave join us.
So I think what was our allocated cut around 4,000 and another 1,900.
Yep.
So I just did a quick look down through. We have approximately, I think it's 20 supply lines at CHS.
Okay.
Cuts across various departments. And I just sort of took a look at how many we actually increased. 7 of the 20 supply lines increased this year. Okay. And minimal amounts, with the exception of, I think, 2. One was our regular education supply line, and then the athletic supplies. The athletic supplies was up last year over budget, and we anticipated a little bit more this year. But 13 of those budget lines were decreased or flatlined to 0, so there were no increases there. We were going to probably look at the cut as athletic supplies, and I know this is coming up, and it'll be the concern, but that's where probably the hit's going to be taken. And we did I really worked hard with my department chairs to look at those supply lines and see where do we need to go, what do we need to be doing. I anticipate science is going to actually be decreasing a little bit next year because we're a little bit more on top of it than we've been. But at the same time, I think we're going to take a bit more than the other schools. But we have it's a high school. There's a whole lot more supplies that you're dealing with in wood shop, or you're dealing with in science classes, or some of those other areas.
Bill, what changes were made in the last 2 years relative to supplies? And I'm thinking about woodshop and
family and
foods.
consumer science.
Right.
That got increased significantly because the school board decided that we weren't going to charge them for lab fees since we're not charging them in those other programs. So the woodshop and the family and consumer science. So the family and consumer science actually jumped up really significantly.
So this supply line went up for equity to make sure the students had access to the supplies.
Right.
And so that's where it comes from. And so that, to answer the question, that's one area that represented a jump because of a change that was made by the board. Thank you.
I'm looking at the numbers, right? And so in Campbell, there's actually 29 accounts. I mean, not that
I just did a quick scan.
But yeah, I mean, but so the numbers are actually fairly flat at Campbell. I mean, so the supply increases are not at Campbell. They're in other areas of this budget.
Yeah.
And then last, we'll talk about buildings and grounds. And if you haven't, I don't think Dave's been before the committee this year, right?
I have not.
You have not. So
welcome.
Dave is now our new facilities director. And I just want to speak for a second about one of the things that we're trying to do is to get leaner as an organization and make sure that we've got a clear line of command. And so we had these sort of two positions that were parallel and confusing. And I think even Dave would say it was sometimes confusing who was doing what. So when Craig Reynolds left the district to go to another district, I said, we've got to break the confusion. Let's have a director. There's somebody at the top who then has a custodial supervisor that will oversee the custodians, but reports to Dave. So it's all an effort to make sure that we've got one person responsible and accountable for this. So, and boy, if there's a guy who knows the nooks and crannies around Litchfield, it's Dave. So I think we've got the right guy in the right seat and can now get some good stuff done. So talk about budgets and impacts.
Yeah, how this is going to affect us, me, the staff, custodians, everybody. GMS, I put in for a slight increase, and that's only because of the portable. You have 4 additional bathrooms, 4 additional kitchenettes, a set of paper towels in each one of them, soaps, toilet papers. The amount of supplies has increased significantly. And not to mention the little students, they make some messes. We're forever getting called in there for cleanups and whatnot. And there's a lot of supplies that are being used. Last year, I didn't budget for the increase. I didn't know what we were getting into. I wanted to feel it out and get a more solid number. I don't think we asked for a whole bunch. It was a small increase. And then I'm looking at this saying, wow, all 3 schools got cut in supply accounts. We're already using the lowest quality of paper towels and toilet papers. Where we're spending our most money is in disinfectants, hand soaps, antimicrobials. I don't want no cheap stuff. Killing germs. Germs is the big thing today in the schools. Even our toilet cleaners, bathroom floor cleaners, wall cleaners, everything is a disinfectant that we use. I try to use a good quality disinfectant. Our wax, we skip out on a little bit. We used to seal the floors 3 coats, wax the floors 3 coats. Now we use a 2-in-1 product. It's a little cheaper. It's a little quicker. It saves us some money. But the biggest expense is the disinfectants, especially when there's a flu outbreak in the elementary school. I got to have the custodians come in on a weekend, disinfect a whole wing, floor, ceilings, walls, desks, chairs, you name it, everything. Light switches, pencil sharp, anything you can think of, anything they touch, anything they handle. This is where the biggest money is spent. If I'm taking a hit of almost 3,000, 2,700, 2,600, 2,800, if I'm taking a hit like this and I have to decrease or buy a cheaper product, if you will, I just feel like the health of the students, the staff, it's just going to be a chain reaction, like a dominoes. I was hoping that you guys would think twice about restoring those funds.
So,
please.
Thank you.
Yes.
Just as we're talking, I'm trying to dig into this a little bit further, right? And so there are 6 location codes across the budget: GMS, LMS, Campbell, district-wide, SAU, and school board, right? Hearing the compelling, discussions that we've had across all the schools, I'm drilling into this, and it's not a Campbell, it's not a district-wide, it's not a LMS, it's not a SAU, it's not a school board, It's at GMS. The large increase is specifically at GMS, specifically, right? And so if I go through this, just the GMS supplies line, 5,300 more in custodial services, 4,000 more in regular there's lots of regular programs here, right? $3,000 more in guidance, $2,000 more in nurse.
Your delta is over 3 years. That's a 3-year.
This is 2019 expense.
But you're saying more than last year?
Correct. Right. So this is the primary, the primary increase across supplies is in specifically GMS.
So we added kindergarten. We added how many square feet at the portables?
1,000 per room, so it's probably 4,000.
So 4,000 plus the hallways, and the bathrooms, et cetera.
That's correct.
So, I mean, we're looking at, if I'm understanding the time frame, it actually makes sense because it's attributed to the kindergarten program and the additional square footage and the need for the supplies.
I also think those numbers are not increases. Example, you mentioned $3,000 in the nurse. It was $2,958 last year. The increase was only 86. Most of our lines actually decreased or stayed the same.
Well, again, looking at 2021 requested to 19 actual. That's what I'm looking at.
And as Dave said, so I wasn't here at the point in time, but the concept of kindergarten and adding the portables was all emerging during the budget process. Was the person in the seat or the people in the seat at the time saying, what are we going to need for extra toilet paper, cleanup, et cetera? And that may have been a miss, and it may have been, maybe we just need to kind of wait and see what happens, because it could be something that gets absorbed.
Well, we didn't know what enrollment was going to be.
Well, that's right.
At that point.
We also have almost $3,000 in there for a classroom we don't know if we need. So if we restored the full amount, the amount that we were talking about encouraging the school board to include in the warrant article, then gets put back into the budget. So we have a motion, right? We have a motion, we have a second.
Yes.
So is there any additional discussion or comments before we vote?
My personal view is supplies is still high, right? I'd like to make a motion to amend to $10,000 increase.
All right, I'll second that one. So we have a motion to amend the increase to account 610 from $20,056 to $10,000.
Yes.
All right. Comments? Anything?
No, this was actually a motion that we originally discussed as a committee.
Right. All right. So all those.
I mean, I think it's important that it's another option instead of looking at this as an all or nothing.
Yes.
All right. So all those who are in favor of amending the motion to an increase of $10,000, please indicate by saying aye. Aye. Opposed? And abstain. Abstain. So it's 801. Did you abstain?
Right.
All right.
801.
801. Yep.
To amend the motion.
So now the motion on the table is to restore $10,000 to account 610 supplies.
Yes.
Additional comments or discussion relative to this motion?
Thank you.
All right, hearing none. All those in favor of restoring $10,000 to line 610, please indicate by saying aye. Aye. Opposed?
Aye.
All right, and abstain. That one passes 630.
I'd like to make a motion to restore $7,435 to line 641 textbooks.
You're killing me.
How much was that? 7,000.
$7,435.
So that was the amount for the
That's full
kindergarten.
no.
641, right?
That
Yep,
is a
line
full-
641.
That is a full restoration.
Yep. So it's been made. Was there a second? I'll second it for discussion.
Thank you.
Yep. Go ahead.
We'll speed it up a little bit. There's no back allocation to one full restoration to a line. I'll ask Principal Thompson to explain what our thinking is on this one.
Okay.
Thank you. We have, as we all know, in this year's budget money contingent on the need for a fifth kindergarten classroom, to fund a teacher, a paraprofessional, new furniture, textbooks, additional furniture, it's a rug for $250 or so, and technology. And again, that was based on the need if we had it for fifth classroom for kindergarten. The budget committee and the school board have talked about, it was warrant article 3, as I believe, moving the positions to a trust fund. That was $99,000. This committee voted to retain 3 of the 4 other accounts in the operating budget. And they were additional furniture, additional equipment, and the replacement furniture. The one that this committee voted to cut was textbooks. I would hold that would put us in an impossible situation in the event we need a fifth kindergarten classroom. Because that textbook line, it's new textbooks, $7,435 is the cost of the teacher's manuals and the student manuals for reading, for writing, and for math. So we really couldn't operate without that money. So I would request that we restore that.
So my question is why this was not rolled into outfitting a new classroom teacher warrant article?
Yeah, so it goes back to the concern I had at the last meeting, which is that we were just creating a pool that was getting so big and so unspecific that it would feel too wishy-washy to the voters and it wouldn't be as well defined. So when the boards debated it and thought about it, they said, you know, it's really, we got to keep it to the personnel. That's the piece that we really want to focus on and not have it become having so many extensions, materials, equipment, textbooks, supplies, that it just becomes kind of like a rainy day fund, because the voters don't like that. They don't like a slush fund concept. They don't like, we just need some money stuck away in case we need it. They want it to be specific. So the board's decision, and trust me, there was a lot of thinking that went into this, was let's keep this streamlined. It's about the position. That's the most, I mean, our budget is 80 some odd % personnel. So that's the piece that we wanted to make sure that we parked, the 99,000. I think in the budget we had 103. And so I said, well, if we just hire somebody, you know, if we take that down 1 year, instead of hiring at step 7 or budgeting as if we're at 7, budget 6, 99,000 then is the right number. And so that was a little bit of a give also to come up with something reasonable. So that's why it's not included in that article, and that article is specific to the personnel.
So without that person, would we need these textbooks and teachers' manuals? So without an additional teacher, we do not need additional manuals.
Correct. So now let's look at the class size enrollment projections, right? So last year, we did not fund the 5th kindergarten, and we probably should have. Our number shot up to 86 at one point.
87 at the highest.
See, he knows the number is solid. 87 students, which was way too many kindergartners having their first experience in school. So we probably should have had that teacher last year, right? But we didn't. We had budgeted for 4, we ran with 4, and we made it work with 4. It was tough, but we did it. This year, the board responded by saying, you know, we got to really look at that class size enrollment. We're talking 4 and 5-year-olds. Many of whom have not been in a preschool experience. This is their first experience in school. We want to make sure that our class sizes are acceptable, and so they reduced it a little bit. And so then if you take that and say, what should we have run this year? Well, we currently have 76,
I believe.
76, which would have, no, 77. It's 77. And it, because it's one over the trigger number.
Yeah.
So we, this year by the guideline would have run 5 kindergartens. We didn't do that. We held off on it. And so now we say, what's the like, so 2 years running, we were over the guideline. And now we're saying, what are we going to have next year? We're asking the voters to take the money we've already raised and appropriated and park it in the expendable trust with the likelihood that it will be used this year. And we're asking the budget committee to make sure that if that triggers, as we think it will, and as the numbers predict it will, that we have the ability in the budget to then outfit it and properly to fund all the rest of the programming that goes with it. So that's why this textbook cut. You know, what's the worst case scenario is that for some reason they don't come, and we have to we don't have the number, and that money is returned as fund balance, because we're not going to just buy other textbooks with it. It's the same commitment we made with the personnel. We honored our commitment. We didn't take that money for the kindergarten teacher and do something else with it, right? We said we're not going to spend it. And the same thing with this textbook line.
I'd also like to point out it's different than like the grade 3 position. We're anticipating an additional grade 3 classroom for next year, but we've already had 5 grade 3s. So what does that mean? It means that we have the teacher's manuals, we have the textbooks to accommodate that number of students. We've never had 5 kindergarten classrooms, so it's a kind of unique situation.
Well, I think what they're asking for is like consistency. It opens up the larger conversation, which is, I think some of the reasoning behind, the motions. Are we going to back out the textbooks, the equipment, the furniture, everything? Because there is why are we putting money in there for something that we might not need? Now, I hear the very valid and prediction probability that we will need it. So I think what the school is asking for is the consistency. If the other items are in there, this should also be in there. What the taxpayer would ask, is what if we don't? What if then there's that amount of money? And yes, it would go to unassigned fund balance, but then it's also in your purview to encumber, do other things with it. So I can understand how that would make people uneasy. So the flip side would be the consistency of backing out all of them. And I understand that with the way that things kind of went, I think it left most of us feeling a little like that doesn't really, like, are we going to commit to taking all of the funds out, or are we leaving them all in for consistency's sake?
Well, that's the decision some people have to make. I feel my votes were.
The 2 motions that failed were totaling about 25,000, if I recall, correct?
Yes.
Just about.
Just about. I'd like an accurate
because I
number.
can speak as someone who switched votes.
Oh, I had them. I may have deleted them because I did an addition. So hold on. See if I have my file open.
Because what it ends up being is that 2 people switched.
I have 18,867 for line 733, 734, and 737. Yep.
That's for, yes.
18,867.
867. What was the other one?
No, those were the 3 that failed.
18,867 was the total of the 3?
Yes.
Okay.
The 7435 passed, and then the 2886 from 610 had passed.
Okay. So what's remaining currently in the budget related to this that was not removed is 18,867.
Mm-hmm.
Got it.
Do we have an idea of kindergarten enrollment January for what's actually enrolled now, January this year versus?
We have not actually rolled that out, but I will tell you that we haven't rolled out enrollment for kindergarten. That'll happen in a month.
Registration, yeah.
Yeah. So I will tell you that projections show an increase in our overall school enrollment for the next 3 years, and we've had an increase for the last 2. We talked earlier about all of the building that goes on, and I don't know enough. I know I've driven also through the new neighborhood, and I know we have picked up students at the elementary level from both the new homes, single-family homes, and also the townhouses. So I would predict, I don't know the price range of the new houses, whether that would be younger families typically, I'm not really sure, but I see it as a strong likelihood. I do know we have had many people who moved to Litchfield when they could. Specifically, they've said because we have full-day kindergarten. And so I believe that is a big draw.
It's great if you're selling. I'm not selling. So the question, I guess, before the committee is whether they wish to keep the numbers in the budget or pull them out and encourage the school board to amend their warrant article. And so I agree there should be a consistency. I believe that the consistency should go the other way.
It's up to the committee. My view is to pull it out and make it consistent, right?
Yeah.
I think this will pass no problem with the voters, and that would be my recommendation.
I think it's very confusing to the voters, and I think it puts forth the idea that future enrollment changes. Like, I feel like the school district is trying to have an insurance policy in case we have enrollment that is high, like we've had the past 2 years, and had to have a fifth class. And if we put this in front of the voters, I think it may set the precedent that, well, next year when we need another fifth grade teacher, that should be on a warrant article also. I think it confuses things from the get-go. And I have gone like every different way with this because I really believe in the warrant article process. I kind of get why the school is just pulling out just the salary of the teacher and paraprofessional. But I think putting all of this together in one package, I just feel like dangerous is the wrong word, but I think it's confusing. I think the whole thing is confusing.
So I personally like the idea of having this fund because I remember 4 days before school, it was a first grade teacher we scrambled to find.
I recall.
So having a fund with the ability for this teacher to outfit their classroom would be beneficial without having to impact other programmatic budgets.
The fund for the salaries, but not the funds for the supplies and the equipment.
That's the difference. Is if we have to hire another fourth grade teacher, all of a sudden the day before school starts, we have the supplies for a fourth grade. We can scrounge together like we did for that first grade teacher. We can pull furniture and desks and textbooks and we can make do for the supplies and the furniture. Kindergarten's a whole different ballgame.
We've had 5 sections of every grade,
right,
except for kindergarten.
I think to the other thing though, it'd be confusing to the voters. Why are we voting for this and leaving costs in the budget? We had a situation a couple of years ago where we voted for a computer lab, but not the teacher. The teacher was a warrant article. The lab was in the budget. We ended up with a computer lab with no teacher because we split the way it should have been, and both of them should have been a warrant. So I see ourselves being in a similar situation. We don't know where the default budget is, but if the default budget is lower and people vote this down, now you end up with no money for your supplies and possibly a teacher.
I know, I get that, but if the warrant article doesn't pass,
then we didn't do our job to support it.
No, if the warrant article doesn't pass, but the enrollment is needed, we have to have the class anyway. Right. So the district has to find the money to pay for the salary. If there's not a need and the supplies and furniture is in there, that money goes back into the general fund. I get Nikki's point about, well, it could be encumbered and used for something else. I'd like
So then why don't we put the teacher back in? Based on that philosophy, we should put the teacher back in the budget. And if it doesn't get spent, it gets returned to the voters.
If I was here when that was done, I would have been in favor of keeping the teacher in. So
my position is it all should come out. So
yep, I get it. We disagree.
But not the first, won't be the last. So I guess the vote.
Can I get clarification?
Yep.
You mentioned we had a computer lab in the budget, but no teacher. We did have a teacher, and that teacher left 2 weeks into the class.
There was a warrant.
Yes, but the teacher left 2 weeks into the class.
Because it was
a full-time teacher cut to part-time. I remember that distinctly.
The elementary position.
Yes.
Yes. So it's funny. I was thinking back to that, and I could be mistaken. I'm not on the budget committee. I thought we had one warrant article for the lab construction and one warrant article. That's what I think, but it's a long time ago.
We had half of it passed. We either had a lab with no teacher or a teacher with no lab, but we only got one of the two.
We had a
Well, we
full-time
ended up with
teacher that
both.
was, I think it was a tutor at the time or something like that. And we made, the board made it, or the district made it, the superintendent made it a part-time position for that lab.
Is that
And
what
then
happened?
the person had a life-changing event or something happened and see you later.
So the
And
question.
that's why we had no teacher.
But the question here is so I guess we could vote and that'll figure out how people feel on this. So put it out there. Unless there's any additional discussion, the only way to resolve it is to vote. So all those in favor of restoring the reduction of $7,435 to line 640, please indicate by saying aye.
Well, I'm sorry, what was that?
You
Aye,
say yes.
yes for me. Yeah, thanks.
Opposed? Aye. And abstain. So it fails 4-5.
So now we're in the position of not being consistent.
Right. So
To which case, then I could remake my motions. Do you want me to do all three at once, or?
let's do one sum.
All right, so for line 734, 334, and 737.
Well, I'm sorry.
So is the kindergarten ones would be $18,867, a reduction to whichever account's largest, knowing that it's a combination of those three. Or do you want me to do one by one?
No. So this is
733 is
that's what I
additional
want.
furniture.
The account 733.
Yep.
734.
737.
Thank you.
That you already
Yep.
did.
For a total of $18,867.
Second.
So the motion's been made and seconded, and to the point that was discussed earlier, it brings it consistent. And so the school board can decide how they'd like to pursue it, but from a consistency basis on the board, the budget committee. Any additional comments? Hearing none. All those in favor of reducing $18,867 across account 733, 734, and 737, please indicate by saying aye. Aye. Those opposed?
Aye.
And those who abstain. So that brings the vote 7-0.
I'm sorry, Michelle, what was the first
Can
vote?
can you do that again? Because I thought it was.
Yeah, I didn't see all the
6-3.
hands.
All right, I didn't see it. I'm sorry. So all those in favor of the reduction of 18,000, aye.
Five.
Five.
Okay.
How many do I have? Is it 6 or 5?
7.
Seven. All right.
Michelle, what was the vote?
And those
on-
opposed.
What,
The vote before was
Yeah.
4-5.
Thank you.
All right, so the vote was 7-2, correct? Or is it 6?
Yes.
Thank you. Thank you for that.
No problem. See, that's the comment, the recommendation at the beginning of the year, right? Raising hands makes it so much easier and clear. All right, so did you have additional?
I do have one more, just one more.
All right, have at it.
I'd move to restore 40,000 to line 110 salaries.
All right, I'll second it for discussion.
So our HR director, Holly's going to join me to talk a little bit about this. So this was let me just follow the bouncing ball with the committee. So we started off with $297,000, which represented the attrition amount that we had last year. And then I asked the committee to reconsider that because I felt that it was a shift in methodology instead of using 3-year averaging. And so I believe Mr. Cutter moved to restore a certain amount back in, 38,000, which brought us closer to the 3-year average, right? So now what we're asking is, I mean, the bulk of our budget is salaries. We invest in people. In looking at those numbers, and it sort of goes back to just the concept that are we cutting it too close, and is an average the right number? If you're using a 50-50 chance of being accurate with that. And our concern is it may not be. And so it may not be the right way to do it. So by asking you to restore $40,000, that brings it down to about 220. I'm going to use raw numbers to keep this easy. So the attrition number then reduces down to 220, which is the lowest amount of the 3 years, right? So it's the low extreme of the 3 numbers that went into calculating the average. So it was 263, 218.9, and 297. And we're saying that because, again, this is where the majority of the investment is in our people. We're looking at situations that we think are favorable for us. We now have a 3-year contract with our teachers. We think that that's going to help us to retain teachers in the district. So we may not have as much. Looking at last year's number, there were more people who left, and people who told us in part they were leaving for other districts where they could make more money. We know that that occurred. We had people who said they were going to jump into administrative positions or somehow move up the career ladder. And in part, it was because they were frozen at salary after it failed, right? So there's no known renegotiated contract, no known contract on the horizon. So people said, I've just got to take care of myself. And so that number did spike up. We think it could be the opposite this year. And so we're asking you to use a factor that makes it more likely that we're not going to be overspent in the salary line. Did I hit that pretty close?
You did, absolutely. That's what I was.
So what's the current reduction in that line?
So
The total, because the total reduction,
the total reduction in that line is 362,000.
and we factored into that the kindergarten, the additional teacher.
Yes. Teacher and para.
Do you have that on a?
I don't.
Oh,
They're
okay.
really,
Yeah.
sorry, I didn't flip it. Here, we'll just stop that. There really isn't a chart for this one
No.
because it's
This
looking
is-
at those variations over time.
And last year was just such a big year for us with employees leaving, and a lot of it was due to the contract. We should see less. We hope to see less going forward with the teacher contract. Hopefully, we get support staff. We get staff that stays. Our insurance costs, hopefully, are stagnant. So we should see a better, rate with that. We have no increase for next year. So hopefully we don't lose a lot of people this year and we go back to this lower number in attrition like in FY20 where we only had about 218,000. Last year was really high, about almost 300,000.
So this is the one where we added 38,000 and it passed 720.
Mm-hmm. So what did we attribute to attrition then? 'Cause we also included in that the benefits reductions for the
That's right.
teacher.
That's
It
a part of
wasn't
the-
just the salary.
It was salary and benefits.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, our calculation is salary, health, dental, FICA, retirement, and we're
Right.
factoring all of that in.
it, yeah.
I don't know where this nudges us, but instead of being hovering on a 50-50, it definitely nudges us more toward 60-40 or something that just gives us a little bit less exposure.
So I appreciate that, but I still can believe that the additional custodian should be a warrant article. So whether that, it's almost, I'd say I could vote to add the 40 and then make a motion to reduce 53. Or we just, for consistency, I think that the custodian should also come out because it's an additional, we've gone back and forth. My position is that there. I understand that there's other ones discussing. So I'm not sure that I'm uncomfortable with the current number, I guess.
Would it help, since our facility director is here and has been a long-term custodian in the district, would you like him to weigh in on why that's such a priority for the district to have extra staffing at the high school?
I agree that it is, and I'm not saying
Had
it's
this
not.
conversation, right?
It's just the policy by which you've implemented
I did
it.
my best to explain it. I'm just thinking, here's a guy that's a notch closer.
If
to
you'd
it.
like to have him speak so that the people watching it can hear him, absolutely.
You
I want you to be clear. It's not that I'm saying that the position is not warranted or needed. My concern is the process by which we're getting there.
Yeah.
The reason why we need an additional custodian for the high school. The high school is one of the most busiest schools. This is a school that's being used 7 days a week. Just the events alone, for the setups, the breakdowns, and then the cleanup after the events, takes away from cleaning classrooms, takes away from cleaning bathrooms, kitchens, hallways, you name it, everything, including the SAU. We could definitely benefit from an additional custodian. It's definitely needed, especially for square footage.
Steve, now the school board's argument has been that this is a restoration of a position that was filled in the past, that we had at one point.
How we used to do this is we had 2 full-time groundskeepers in the summertime. In the wintertime, we'd shut that position off. We'd pull them inside and put them on second shift for cleaning. Now the demands have gotten so high for the grounds crew. And not only that, we only have a part-timer now. We cut one of them to part-time. So we have a full-timer and a part-timer. We made them year-round for snow removal, salt and walkways. We keep them day shift and outdoors. They do all the maintenance on all the equipment, snow blowers, all the summer equipment. Everything's getting maintained. We don't send anything out anymore. It's all done in-house. So there's quite the savings there, and I overlook all the projects. There's a savings there. However, we're lacking now on the cleaning side, where we used to pull them indoors, which is it's a big gap. And a lot of times, too, if somebody's out sick at one of the other buildings, I got to pull from one building and send them to the other. I could leave 2 custodians at the high school. And just the benefits and the events and the sporting events that take place, voting, the graduation. I can just go on and on and on. The events are really time consuming.
And you'd be a great person to advocate for that warrant. But so for me, it's a process issue. It's not so much whether or not, but again, it's the will of the committee and how they wish to proceed with that. But the motion on the table is the $40,000. Are there any additional discussion? I'm not sure that I'm uncomfortable with it. I appreciate the concern, but I'm not sure about other people's stance and positions.
Prefer year one.
Well, right now, the question is the $40,000 attrition. I'd be happy to make so we have on the thing to make an additional 40. Actually, I was going to say I could amend that to a reduction of 13, but I'm not sure that I'm uncomfortable with the original 40.
What are you proposing?
I'm not proposing anything yet. I'm talking out loud.
So the motion on the table is to restore $40,000 to line 110 salaries, right?
Right. So, and that would bring the attrition number to, what were we saying?
220.
Roughly 220.
So we're at 260. I have that chart. 250. All right. I will make a motion. So you're
There's
playing.
a motion on the table.
I can make a motion to amend.
Oh.
Yeah.
So in the efforts of being, what did it go, 53? It's 53,000. So the additional custodian position is 53,000. So if I take your 40 addition and leave it, and then amend it to reduce 13, we achieve the same result as adding 40 and removing 53. Right? Yes. So, but it's too confusing to everybody. All right. So I was combining two motions into one by making an amendment, but I'm not going to do that. So all those in favor of amending the line 110 salaries to include an additional $40,000, please indicate by saying aye.
I'm sorry. Can you repeat that again?
All right, we're going back to the original motion.
Right now.
The original motion,
Okay.
$40,000. Restoring $40,000 to line 110. I'm sorry, I tend to think out loud. I'm sorry. So 110, additional $40,000.
Thank you.
For attrition. All those in favor, please indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed?
Aye.
Aye. All right, abstain. All right.
What was the count on that?
180.
180.
You are sleeping on the couch
I am
tonight.
sleeping.
But I think, one way to achieve your goal
We
would be
know.
to put a warrant article adding the additional person. Rather than make a motion to remove 53, I think you have the opportunity to request an additional 53.
Yep, totally understood. I think, I'm going to defer to the board. I think they've got to decide, is the stance has been that that's not an additional person, that we've had the position in the past, and that, again, we're back to the dueling warrant articles about needs and wants, and the sense is that that's not something that the board wants to venture into, because I think the minute we dip our toe back into that area, it could go down an ugly path in the future, right? So the board needs the flexibility, is what I've heard, to be able to staff the buildings as needed, and not to be putting every position on the warrant. And our sense is that the last vote of the public was you don't have to do that too. So
We can, disagree in the interpretation of that, but I'm giving you an opportunity to, by not seeking the additional 53, I feel that there's an opportunity, if you feel that strongly, a way for you to achieve your goal.
And we'll take that back to the board, because ultimately it is the board's
Right.
to make.
So are there any other, did you have any more?
Nope, that's the 5 for me.
Did anybody else have any other items that they'd like to discuss?
So at the moment, right, just to ground the committee, right, before any motions were made this evening coming into tonight's meeting, our revised budget committee budget for the school was 22,319, 710.40, which is a 1.52% increase. With the increases made this evening, which total minus the 18,000, which total 4,531. That's the sum of all the motions made this evening. The revised budget tonight is 22,324,241.40. which is a 1.54% increase.
Is it really 40 cents?
Yes. Could be rounding. But
Just to annoy people.
it's probably rounding somewhere, but
It's like I'm making a motion to add $39 to make it 250. I'm like, come on.
So I'm not sure what
Or 90.
risk pool that puts us at, but it's still very close to 50-50, I would imagine, just to put that out there.
The sum of the motions that we asked for were to add $80,889 in. But because a few failed and an additional cut was made, we only gained how much? You said
4,531.
Divided by
With
20
the-
people in the room in 3 hours.
With the hope
With the
that
hope-
18,867 is back on a warrant and fully supported by this by the town. I mean, that is
Understood. Yeah.
All right. So are there any other motions relative to adjustments on these accounts? So then entertain a motion. We're doing bottom line, right? So 22 million.
So I will make a motion to approve a bottom line budget for the school of 22,324,241.40.
All right. Is there a second? I'll second it. All right.
So
Go ahead.
we're like 1,000% sure on these numbers?
Yes.
I just wonder
However,
if we're better
if-
off waiting until
The business administrator wants to review it, and if there is an adjustment, we can always revote it after the budget hearing next week.
We have a meeting scheduled.
So I would ask that the business administrator just double check. We'll go from there.
Well, we need to be in contact with them anyway because the budget
Default.
hearing has to include the default number.
No, that's true. Yep.
So
we're gonna have to vote on it anyway.
we have to vote. Yeah, we'll have to vote. But
We'll have to,
we don't vote on the default budget.
if there is some type of adjustment that was miscalculated and validated by the business administrator, then we will revote this budget.
So I guess people could decide that they'd rather table the vote until after the budget hearing to know what the default budget looks like. That's
Right.
That's fine.
Yeah, because
okay.
we're voting on an article
Incomplete
based on your
article.
number, but not including the
Right.
budget, the default budget.
All right.
So
So we will table the vote for, I will withdraw my second, you withdraw your motion,
So moved.
and we will vote on a recommendation on the budget once we have the completed warrant article written.
Can I just want to make sure I'm clear on it because I thought the budget committee set this number, the budget number, and the school board sets the default number.
That's right.
Correct? So
Some people may
how does
just-
one impact the other? If
Some people may decide that they are comfortable with the default budget and choose to not vote in favor of the proposed budget. It's an option. Without knowing that information, they can't make a fully informed decision. Traditionally, we have the default number by now.
the only reason I'm suggesting we wait for the default number is because there's a whole bunch of X's there. So I just feel like from a
No.
process standpoint, it seems right to wait.
Yeah, I asked that. I just look at it was a huge investment of time and resources and energy to get to that number, which I doubt that when Corey does it, he's going to he might find the 40 cents. I don't know.
I'm sure it's Excel rounding.
So it's probably pretty accurate, and it's the number that you
Add
come up with,
$8
but that's fine.
and 60
I understand you want to see the whole.
Yep.
That's fine.
All right, so that puts us in a good position for that one. Are there any other items relative to the school budget we'd like to discuss tonight before we move on?
So the only position that's gonna go on a warrant article is extra kindergarten teachers.
We're not really going on a warrant article, it's more of a creating a fund should an additional teacher be
Because I've
required.
been clear about my positions on added
Mhm.
or recreated positions. I have a problem with it, not going to the voters. That's my only statement.
All right, so before these people leave and enjoy their evening, why don't we, if there's any member input or questions relative to these guys, we might, although, do we have much for the town to discuss?
I just had a question for the town, but no, I mean, so thank you. It's been, a journey, right? For all, right? It's, I appreciate all the input and the effort that goes into preparing the school budget. As I reflect just briefly back on the process, maybe it makes sense just throwing out a wild card idea right? I know the school has an all-day marathon meeting for budget review. This would require some level of trust and collaboration, but maybe if the Excel file is prepared in advance of that session, I come to that all-day session and I share preliminary what I see in the numbers, and we work together.
It's open to the public. We have been in,
Right, but I don't have
anybody can come.
I don't have the data.
We didn't get the data until that day either this year.
That is the challenge.
So,
right.
Yeah.
Just a thought. Just a thought.
That's because we had a delay.
Hopefully the software issues will be sorted and we'll be more efficient in streamlining the data collection next year.
We need to keep in mind the two things. It was the software upgrade conversion that set us back significantly. In fact, I'm still not sure we're totally out of it, to be honest. And I think some of that is impacting where we are with calculating default. I think there's a factor there that we have to be mindful of.
Something going on in there, yeah.
And second of all, I just want to make sure that when we get you data that it's accurate, because if it's an incomplete work product and then we're making assumptions off it, it just is troubling, right?
So the idea is it's advisory, right? This is what I see, a different approach. You folks are going page by page and understanding it. I'm putting on a different lens to it, right? So let's work together, both methods, right? I can show you what I see. You can have your school discussions, and that's it, right? Again, in the spirit of transparency and collaboration.
Absolutely.
That was the thought.
Yep.
Okay.
Will you be representing the school board? I mean, the budget committee?
No.
Or will you be a citizen?
No, I will be a citizen as a resident.
Great. We would love to have people come to our
But I need
budget work day.
For me to do that though, I mean, again, I need the data, right? That's the key.
I would have been there, but I was out of state. I did
Well, and
watch
I
it
think-
all on YouTube.
And I think, the beauty of our democracy and our system here in Litchfield is the checks and balances. And, we have various perspectives on what we need and what we, how we represent our taxpayers. Our job as a school board and as administration and our highly trained professionals is to provide programming for our students to the best capability we can. And I think, it costs money. So, it's a naturally kind of
there's a tension.
Right. So I appreciate the new perspective and the new analysis. And I really appreciate everybody coming in and spending so many evenings here talking about your budget sessions and fighting, for every dollar to get the best we can do for our kids. So thank you.
Yes, thank you very much.
And so I just wanted to explain my vote because I voted first to restore the 74.35 for the textbook, right? That failed. So then we were in the position of it not being consistent. So then I did vote for the full reduction. So then it's consistent. Everything is pulled out with the hope that the school board and school side would amend the article to include those funds. So it might seem contradictory, but there is a method to my madness.
I gotcha. I appreciated the consistency. Any other comments anybody would like to make or questions towards as part of member input towards the school before we spend a couple minutes on the town and then reopen member input?
Nope.
All right. Thank you guys.
Thank you
so much. I'm sure we'll see you again next week. If not sooner, since I'll
Budget
see you around.
hearing, CHS auditorium.
Budget hearing is budget hearing is 7:00 at Campbell High School. So if you come here, we'll be there. Which is good for me. It's a short.
It's longer.
All right. So.
Turn your cell phone off. Yeah, next week. Yep.
Updates relative to the town budget or town.
You had some questions.
I just had one question, right?
Did you get them answered? Did Troy answer you?
Yes, so that was answered, but a question regarding the capital improvement planning committee. I know there was supposed to be a meeting scheduled for January. I haven't received any details on that, so I just want to be.
I don't know anything about it.
All right, so that's something that we just need
Follow
to.
up
If
with
it's going to
Troy.
be scheduled this month, I'd just like to get it on the calendar.
Okay.
I can talk to Troy anyway. We start our presentation, so I'll ask him about the.
You're gonna ask him, or you want me to?
You can do.
You want me to reach out to? Okay.
Absolutely.
Okay, we'll get it to you one way or the other.
Thank you.
We've asked.
All right. Anything else anything you'd like us to know?
No, we've had a lot of deaths in the town lately. It's seems to be a rash of it going on. You know, Jen, your family, and Kurt Schaefer had somebody passed away, and Patty at the town clerk's office, and now it's Dave Mellon at the town facility in a fire. And it's just thoughts and prayers go out to all of you.
Absolutely.
You know, if there's anything we can do to help you out, that's all I got. Yeah.
One other,
It stinks.
A tough transition to that.
Moment of silence.
We're in January, right? And one question on the year-end numbers and where we actually landed in terms of unassigned fund balance for the town.
I think Troy was working on that. So, yep.
Again, tough transition. So.
Yep. Hey, ask away.
I mean, it was pretty close with, if we get the weekly,
Yep.
we look at percentages left versus.
Yeah, but there's always bills that haven't yet come in. and-
Right, so what's the real?
Right. That's the thing.
Sick this year.
All right. Anything else? Otherwise, I'll move into member input again. All right, general member input. We can start over here.
Good.
All right, I have the CIP plan for the school, if you'd like to provide us with an update.
No, it's super exciting. Super happy to be a part of it. As a non-voting member is totally cool. I was very realizing as I looked around the room, I was the only person there not directly related to the school, didn't have, their own dog in the fight. But I did really like, there was a lot of talk about fiscal responsibility to the taxpayers. How can we do the most with what we have already, right? So really looking broad scope, which is not as much of the conversation as we've had before. The superintendent said a lot of what I was going to say as far as the updates, but it's just very promising. And I'm hoping, again, that plans will come to fruition.
I hope so. 'Cause I'm tired of paying for proposals and getting
But I do think it's hard. There isn't citizens at large, and because of the meeting time, I think there wasn't able to be the Board of Selectmen input as well. So that
I'm not sure about
makes
that,
it
but
tough.
Is Kurt there?
no,
Is Kurt
he has
there?
not come to a meeting yet.
He's got some issues.
Okay, but it would be great to have a different rep from the select board if that
Yes.
If it's possible.
if it's possible. Yeah.
Just to cover the bases.
I'll reach out to him and find out what's going on.
Thank you. Thanks, Bob.
And I just hope that people's takeaway from tonight is not, okay, so we spent how much time for $4,000 something dollars. That's really not what happened here. I mean, if you look at just the numbers, sure, but I think there was a lot of interesting, important discussion, transparency to the voters for people to be able to look at this, that we gave this the thorough look it deserved. And the rationale behind the numbers makes sense. So that's what I got hit with after a couple meetings ago. So
It's been a very learning experience. I gotta say.
It is.
All right. So do you have anything for member input you'd like to?
It's been
Good.
quite an experience.
it ain't over yet.
You know, this board's had disagreements over the year and stuff, but I tell you what, I can't think of better people that I'd sit in the room with and try to hash things out. Sorry, Selectman,
Steve's watching right now.
especially Kevin.
Yeah, I don't know if it's going to come out right, how I kind of mean it, but when I hear things such as, I don't want to pick on the school, but that's the one I heard it from, was when you're afraid, you don't want to put something on a warrant article because you're afraid the voters are going to vote it down. Kind of sets, to me, it's kind of a dangerous thought because the voters are the one paying for things. And if you're afraid to put it on a warrant article because they don't want it, they don't want to pay for it, it's kind of disrespectful, I think, to people actually paying the bills.
I think it's more, coming as a school board member, it's not a fear that the voters won't like it or that they won't vote for it. But if it's a true need for the district and our professionals are telling us it's a need and our admins are telling us it's a need, then, like I said earlier, our job is to listen to our professionals and do what we need to do to provide programming for our students. So,
I'd also like to say it's also should be part of your or the school board or whoever to listen to the people who have to pay the bill. It's not just what the teachers say. It's if the people.
No, and we absolutely do that. I mean, we made hundreds of thousands of dollars in reductions before we sent it to you guys. So,
but if you vote for something, if you put it on a warrant article and people say no, then they're telling you they don't want it. That's it.
Or they're telling us they don't want to pay for it.
Exactly. Even the same.
I disagree. But we can disagree all day long. So
Absolutely.
no, I'm good.
All right.
Motion to adjourn.
Okay, motion to adjourn
Second.
and second, thirds.
4:30.
All those in favor of adjourning, please say aye. Aye. All right, opposed? Well, it's a fight between Bill and
Several
Jen.
of us
Huh?
seconded.
There was a bunch of them. Take a pick.
There you
Take a
go.
pick.
So as a
Anyone will take
reminder,
credit on that one.
our next meeting is next Thursday, January 16th. We will start at 7 o'clock with a budget hearing. Following the budget hearings for both the town and the school, we will meet to vote recommendations on school warrants. So thank you, and we hope to see you then
At the school.
at the school, Campbell High.